A meeting of the Carson City Board of Supervisors and the Carson City Liquor and Entertainment Board to order. Today is Thursday, October 1st, 2015. It is 8:30 a.m. We're in the Community Center at the Sierra Room at 851 East William Street in our very own Carson City. Could we call on our good friend Father Jeff Paul, who brought some rain this morning to get us started off?
Roll call.
Roll call. Well, I was going to Jeff anyway. That's it. Roll call first, Jeff. Hold on. Go.
Supervisor Aboud.
Here.
Supervisor Bonkowski.
Here.
Supervisor Bagwell.
Here.
Supervisor Scher.
Here.
Mayor Kroll.
Here.
Do we have a quorum?
Okay. Now, Jeff. Sorry. I had you on my mind, so, didn't see you for 24 hours.
Thank you, Sheriff. Mr. Mayor, members of the supervisors, let us pray. Gracious God, send down upon our supervisors, the city staff, our law enforcement, and all who serve this community the spirit of wisdom, charity, and justice, that with steadfast purpose they may faithfully serve in their offices to promote the well-being of all people. In your name we pray.
Amen. Told you had to do the high five. That's everybody's signature.
Could you probably lead us in the pledge, please?
Sure.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we're now going to move to item number 5, public comment. This is the time for the public to comment on anything that's relevant to or within the authority of this body. We generally take public comment as things happen on the agenda, although I will tell you that one thing today where there will not be public comment, and that when we take up the special use permit appeal, the appeal from the Planning Commission, since that is kind of a quasi-judicial move, we're going to limit that to the appellants and the applicants. So anybody want to speak today? Good morning. Carol, how are you?
I'm pretty excited.
Good.
Good morning, Carol Howell, Carson City. I'm here representing the Shootout for the Future fundraiser event we're planning for Saturday. And I just want to kind of thank all of you for participating. Thank you for the Parks Department has been fabulous in working with us in the planning, some extra grading for parking, and getting the facility ready for the event on Saturday. So please tell them that we do appreciate all the work that they've done and working with us. We're pretty excited. The event is Saturday morning from 9 to 3. We've got some great sponsors, including Cabela's has come out. And we've got over 100 raffle prizes worth thousands and thousands of dollars. So we're pretty excited and hopeful that we can raise some funds to give to all of you. So thank you for participating.
Thank you, Carol, very much.
Oh, by the way, any of you that are coming out, please plan to be there 15-20 minutes early so you can get to Bay 2, that's at the far end, and check in at your shooting time. Okay?
Any other public comment? Anybody? Okay, I don't see any. We'll now move to item 6, possible action, the approval of the minutes of August 20th, 2015. Everybody had a chance to read those? Motion's in order.
Move to approve the minutes of August 20th, 2015 as presented.
Second.
Motion and second on the motion. Discussion. Hearing and seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carried unanimous. On September 3rd, I understand there's going to be an abstention.
Yes, I'm going to abstain since I was not there for that meeting.
Okay.
I move to approve the minutes of September 3rd, 2015 as presented.
Second.
Motion and a couple seconds on the motion. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carried unanimous. Okay.
No,
On-
one abstention.
One abstention. Okay, thanks. Boy, I'm moving fast today. One abstention. Okay. take up item 7. City Manager, any changes to the agenda?
Mr. Mayor, you should have in front of you late material. It's a letter from the president of KLS Design Group. He is representing the firm that is now going to withdraw their appeal of a planning commission decision. So therefore, item 21B, 21 Bravo, we're going to pull. The rest of the agenda will go as currently published.
Okay, all right. With that said, then we'll take the agenda as published unless there's an objection. All right, hearing no objection, let's recess as the Board of Supervisors. We'll reconvene as the Liquor and Entertainment Board, and we'll let the record reflect that we have all the Board of Supervisors here and the sheriff. So we want to take up item 10, public comment. Anybody on liquor and entertainment? I don't see any. Minutes of September 3rd, 2015. Everybody had a chance to look at those?
Mr. Mayor, I will abstain on that since I was not
Okay.
here.
I move to approve the minutes of the Carson City Liquor and Entertainment Board for September 3rd, 2015 as presented.
Second.
Motion and second on the motion. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carried. 4 ayes, 1 abstention. Okay, now we'll move to item 12. This is the issue of possible action for Steve and Cheryl Mathwig as the liquor managers for Mathwig Investments LLC, DBA Crossroads Lounge. Lena, are you going to do this for us? Come on up, folks.
This item is for possible action to approve Steve and Cheryl Mathwig as the liquor managers for Mathwig Investments LLC, doing business as Crossroads Lounge. Liquor license number 16-30886, located at 300 East Winnie Lane. They are applying for a full liquor license. The bar will be open from 7 a.m. to 1 a.m., and staff is recommending approval.
Good morning. How are you doing this morning?
Fine, thank you,
Why
sir.
don't you folks introduce yourself for the record and tell us what you're doing? And
My name is Steve Mathwig. This is my wife, Cheryl. We'd been looking around for a while for a nice little place to own, for something to supplement our retirement for when I retire in about another dozen years. And we came across that place, and it looks good, and we were going to try to improve it up a little bit, make it look a little bit nicer, make it a little safer for the employees and for the customers, and just hopefully have just a nice small supplemental income.
very good. Okay. And on alcohol server training, your employees do that? Have they been through server training? Going to be?
I know that 2 of the employees have been in the business for, each of them for like 25 years. I believe they've been through it. We have one that I know that hasn't been. She's only been there 6 months. That will be one of the first things on my agenda, is get her into the training classes that she needs. And the 4th one has been in the business for about 7 years. I believe she's been through the training.
Very good. Questions? Anybody? Questions or?
And we have a letter from Health and Human Services that there were some violations at the site. Do you know if those have been corrected?
We are in the process of that. The major one is they have a sanitizer there that sometimes works, and we have purchased a 3-position sink, and we will get that installed this weekend.
Anybody else? Public comment? Motion's in order.
I move to approve Steve and Cheryl Mathwig as the liquor managers for Mathwig Investments LLC, DBA Crossroads Lounge, liquor license number 16-30886, located at 300 East Winnie Lane.
Motion and second on the motion. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Carried unanimous. Thanks for doing the investment even in your retirement or with your retirement. That's okay.
Thank you, sir.
We'll make a little supplemental income and do well. Okay. Thank you. Let's take up 12 Bravo. This is Randall Lyman, Liquor Manager for Good Spirits Distributing. Morning, Randall. How are you? Lena, go ahead.
This item is for possible action to approve Randall Lyman as the liquor manager for Good Spirits Distributing LLC, liquor license number 16-30967, located in Henderson, Nevada. They are applying for a general wholesale liquor license. They will be distributing in the Carson City area. Staff is recommending approval. Today, Matt Saltzman from Colasar and Latham is here to represent Mr. Lyman. Staff is recommending approval.
Let me see if there's any questions first. Anybody have any questions? Public comment? You don't need to add anything if you don't want to, don't. Motion's in order.
Mayor, I appreciate being in.
You want to talk a little bit about what you're doing? That's fine. Go.
Yes, I'm Matt Saltzman, counsel for Randy Lyman and Good Spirits. Good Spirits acquired all of the business of a distributor in Henderson called Booze Brothers, and they were focused on distributing the alcohol from Nevada's, I think, only micro distillery. That is the first and maybe the only small distillery, and it's expanding from there with specialty blends and special items that it's going to be growing as a distributor from just distributing that micro distillery's product. Part of its business is going to be delivering to retailers in Carson City who order their products, and they want to have the opportunity to do that, and that's why we're before you today. We appreciate your consideration.
Very good. Anybody? Motion's in order.
I move to approve Randall Lyman as the liquor manager for Good Spirits Distributing LLC, liquor license number 16-30967, located in Henderson, Nevada.
Motion and second on the motion. Discussion. Hearing none. All in favor, signal by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Carried. Unanimous. Thank you. Tell your client you did a good job. All right. All right. We're now on item 13, closing public comment under Liquor and Entertainment Board. Anybody? I don't see any. Then unless there's an objection, we will adjourn as the Liquor and Entertainment Board. We'll reconvene as the Board of Supervisors, and we'll take up item 16. This is a presentation only by the Carson Water Sub-Conservancy District regarding update activities on the Carson River watershed. Do you need a minute, Ed, to get set up?
I think I can start talking and working at the same time.
Why don't you just go ahead and get her set up, and then when you're ready to go, just go.
For the record, Ed James with the Carson Water Sub-Conservancy District, and I'm hoping to be the first to wish you a happy 2016 water year. It started today officially. Hopefully we can forget about 2015 and move forward. What I want to do is just cover a couple items that are occurring in the watershed this last year, kind of give you an update of the entire watershed, and if you have any questions afterwards, hopefully I can answer those. First, just give you a brief overview. Many of you may already know what the Sub-Conservancy does, but we really promote cooperative action across agencies and political boundaries in the Carson River watershed using an integrated water management plan. So really working cooperatively, dealing with all water issues up and down the entire watershed. One of the things that's unique in this watershed is the Carson River Coalition. It was established in 1998. It really brings all the different entities together. It's really kind of a think tank, large shareholders, stakeholders that in the watershed that have concerns. The nice thing about this is it has no authority, so it really is just strictly a think tank, and it gets information, but then that is distributed back to the different counties, state agencies, to come up with ideas of how to implement them. So really it's kind of a broad perspective of private, public entities coming together. I always like to show this slide because it's important to understand that when we talk about water supply and the demands on the system, we have three major users. We have the environment, we have our domestic use, and we have agriculture. And it's important that when we start planning these resources that we don't adversely affect the other. I call it a three-legged stool, that if you were to take one from the other at a disadvantage, your stool will not be even. And so it's important that when you start doing planning that you look at this, because the environment depends upon the water it gets from agriculture, and the people come to this area because of the environment, because of the agriculture area. But if we try to take one from the other, we can adversely affect that, and we can impact the entire lifestyle of our watershed. So all our planning looks at that. So I first want to do is talk about drought. It's going to be a dry subject, but bear with me. This first one is some slides from the USGS, and this is a 2-year showing a 14-day running average on a gauge is at the West Fork at Woodford's. The dark black line is what was this year's, and if I, let's see if I turn this on. Okay, I'll just, maybe I can point here. No. All right. So the green is your average. The blue is your wetter periods. Your kind of reddish color is your drier periods. And the black line is what we had the last 2 years. So you can see that, it's a dry year. We've had it, but we've seen worse. We have some new records this year, especially at Woodford's around June, July. That red line will now cover where that black went when they update this. But you can see that, it was a dry year, but we've seen worse. This is on the East Fork, the Gardnerville gauge, kind of the same thing. And then here is at the Carson City gauge. This one's important to Carson City because you do take water out of the Carson River. If the flows drop below 8 CFS, you get restricted on how much water you can take out of the river. You can see, again, dry, but we have seen a lot worse in the past years. So even though we talk about a dry year and the impacts of it, be aware that we have seen worse years. I show this as more of an indicator slide. This slide shows 8 staging rain gauges in the northern Sierra. Now, this is not our precipitation, but what it really kind of shows is what we've been dealing with the last several years. It's hard to see, but the light blue background is the average from 1922 to 1998, and that's about 50 inches of precipitation. The next colors are the different years that we've had in the last 4 years. The dark blue, which is at 37.3, is our current year. You can see that even last year, we got less precipitation than this year. The bottom line is the precipitation that occurred in 1977, which is kind of our drought of record we talk about. You can see that we almost got double the amount of precipitation we did in 77. So you look at this and say, well, wait a minute, it doesn't look that bad. However, our rivers and systems were really impacted by a 4-year drought. And that's what really got us is the last, like in 77, it was just really a 1-year drought. But when you have accumulation of 4 years, it has an impact. The other thing is I want to show is on this slide. This is taken at the Reno weather station. It's a little hard to see, but the top one is the temperature. And the dark line is what the daily numbers were through this year, from October through August. And one of the things that's interesting to see is that if you look at the lower blue, that's your lower records. Your green, which is in the background, is your average, and then the red, the top one, is your higher temperatures. We're shifted up. We were warmer this period. In fact, I just read an article in California that 2015 water year, they were 3 degrees warmer than average and 1 degree warmer than the highest previous average. And we got the same thing here. If you look at the middle graph, that's how much precipitation occurred. Again, you can see it was 5.83. The average is around 7. So we weren't that far behind. What really is an indicator is the bottom one is how much snow fell there. They got a total of 2.7, and the average is 20. Our storage is the snowpack, and we had some very warm storms, and we did not get the snowpack this year, and that's what really caused this whole year. So if you look at total precipitation, we weren't that dry. We were below average, but with the lack of snow is what really impacted us. Now, how did the communities do? Overall, every water purveyor, and there are 12 in this watershed, was able to meet their water needs pretty well. Carson Valley, Carson City, Churchill County, their water supply is in really good shape. Now, this doesn't mean that the staff was sitting around doing nothing. I guarantee you, after running a district about the same size as Carson City, they were busy this summer, making sure that the water was there. But overall, if you look at where they are and your supply Carson City has and the other entities, they're in pretty good shape even for the future. Lyon County was able to meet its demands, but we know that that's going to be where the shortfall is. In the future, they're going to be running out of water as growth continues. One of the things I want to show, and this is an issue of wet water versus paper water. This is the pumping records taken from the state engineer. This is called the Churchill Valley Groundwater Basin. They're around Silver Springs. And the two columns, one is the committed groundwater rights. There are almost 4,000 committed groundwater rights for irrigation, just under 500 for stock and commercial, just under 6,500 for quasi-municipal. Domestic doesn't need a water right, so there's no allocation. So the total allocation in this groundwater basin is 10,845. Doesn't have the date on it, but the pumping, this was 2013. The pumping for irrigation was 581, commercial 54, quasi-municipal was 530, and domestic wells do have a pole on the system, and that was 1,405. That's an estimate that the state engineer puts on for total use of 2,570 acre-feet of water. Thing is, the perennial yield in that basin is 1,600. So they're already pumping more than what the perennial yield is. Now, the state engineer has what they call a system yield, where basically you get some return flows, and so you may get some more water, but we know there's going to be an upside down there. Now, what's tough, if you're looking at, especially when the parkway comes through, and also ties 80 with 50 in the industrial park, you're going to see a lot of demand out there. If you talk to the municipality, they got almost 6,500 on the books. They only use 500. They got 6,000. How much of that is really wet water? How much can that really be developed? That's really going to change how you get into the actual development. The municipality did everything correct under Nevada water law to acquire those water rights. The state just over-allocated it. And this is something the state engineer is going to have to deal with in the near future. And it makes it a little tough for planning because if you're there in their area, they have plenty of water for future growth. But the actual water availability is in question. Overall, how they're...
Where's the Churchill groundwater basin? What are the...
Silver Springs, if you know that, basically.
Yeah, how about, but does that affect us? Talk, in terms of basins, what basin are we in?
You are in the Eagle Valley
Right.
basin here.
So do you have similar data on Eagle Valley, or we're just talking?
I do have those. We are in pretty good shape, Eagle Valley. We
Okay,
have
I
not.
see what you're saying.
I showed that one because the example,
Right.
that one's, I always call it canary in the watershed, because that one is going to be the first one that's going to be the tipping point. Carson Valley is over appropriated, like all the basins are in our watershed, but we're not over pumping the perennial yield. The only one that's being over pumped, the perennial yield, is the Churchill Valley one, which is Silver Springs area.
Thanks, that clarifies.
Yeah. So again, we're in pretty good shape locally here. And it gets back to the groundwater basins overall. We're not being overdrafted, except for the Silver Springs, but again, we haven't seen significant water. But that doesn't mean that we're out of the clear. There are some subbasins that are being impacted, and these are just some of the listed areas that are seeing water levels drop. And some of the people have had to deepen their wells. This is not caused by municipal wells. They're typically, most of these areas are domestic wells impacting domestic wells. We always tend not to think that domestic wells put a draw on the system, but they really do. And it's something that we are dealing with the state engineer. The Ruhenstroth area is one of the concerns we have because their water tables are dropping significantly. Their nitrate levels are increasing because everyone's on a septic system. And it's just kind of circling, getting more and more concentrated. So sooner or later, something's going to have to be done in that area. And that's near, if you know, that's the southern part of Douglas County. So from drought, let's talk about flooding. If you were in Douglas County, if you're a Douglas County Commissioner this summer, you spent almost your entire time dealing with flood issues. So flooding is something that even in a drought comes around. We have been working on a regional floodplain plan since basically 2004. And this picture is a good example. This is our flood protection. Our floodplains are something that we really want to focus on and protect. I won't go into all the bullet points here because we've talked about it in the past. But one thing is we do have a regional floodplain plan that we've been working on that was adopted by all 5 counties in 2008. And the main focus of that was dealing with the living river concept. The idea, instead of trying to canal our river, make an LA channel, basically, we wanted the floodplains to access their floodplains. So the floodwaters would go into the floodplains. It does a great thing of recharging. It's helpful for the environment, and that was the most healthy way of dealing with our flood issues here. So this has been a plan in place. We got a grant from FEMA to remap the floodplains, and we've been remapping from basically upstream of Lahontan all the way to Alpine County. When this project is done, we will have a single map or model that can show the cumulative impacts. So you can see how this may impact if development goes in Douglas County. What does that do to the flows through all the way down to Lahontan? It's one of those first in kind. We're using a brand new model that's being developed by the Corps of Engineers. We're one of the beta testers. And when we're done, we should have state-of-the-art modeling and a tool that's nice that when a developer comes in, they don't have to hire a person to develop say, okay, I want to build in this floodplain, what is it going to mean? They'll have to hire an engineer, typically, to look at what the impacts are. They can get that. Their engineer can input their project into that. The staff can easily read it because they'll know what the model does. They don't have to learn a new model. And they basically look at the impacts there. It'll streamline a lot of the process there, but also protect our floodplains. Part of the grant is also looking at our ordinances in each county, because as we get some changes, there are going to be some impacts. This is one of the, this is existing flood maps that's shown in Lyon County, just upstream of the Dayton area. You can see the darker blue, that is a floodplain. There are already homes in that floodplain. We've already known that. I mean, that's been existing. With the new model, we will actually have floodplains and a floodway. And a floodway basically is a more restricted area where you really can't build into it, because you're trying to allow the water to flow down. And so you can build in your floodplain up to a point where it gets to basically a 1 foot elevation rise in the water. However, when we do the floodway on this, some of those homes are in the floodway now because they don't have one. So Lyon County is going to need to be able to say, okay, what's going to happen in the future if someone wants to add a garage or something? What kind of mitigation would be acceptable in Lyon County to be able to do that? That's the same up and down the watershed. This is taken at Hell's Bells. This is Carson City. Again, this is our existing. This one actually has a floodway and a floodplain. But you'll see here, if you look at the lower one, when they did these maps, and this is taken from 1980 data, and their elevation accuracy back then was plus or minus 5 feet. So it wasn't that accurate. That lower line was really just kind of a rough estimate. The new data that we have is much more accurate, and that water line goes up and down. What's interesting is that the depth of water in our new modeling hasn't changed from the old one. It's just a little more accurate. However, there are some homes along there that may be in the floodplain now because they weren't in the original maps. Doesn't mean that they weren't supposed to be. In fact, there's a property, and if this pointer had worked, the property near the corner at the end of Hell's Bells, someone wanted to build there. It was out of the floodplain according to these maps. Well, when they actually had a survey of the land, they found that they were below what the actual water level is. Under your existing rules, that person has to elevate the property to the flood level plus 2 feet. They have to bring in 5 feet of fill. And yet, if you looked at the flood maps, you'd say, oh, I'm fine, I'm out of it. But the reality is it was not true. So the new maps will be much more accurate and give better data for all your customers. Another point we'll look at is this is right down below Hell's Bells. It turns out that this little area south of it, the road is about 2 inches below the 100-year floodplain. So the water would theoretically pour over and come into this area and could possibly hit. The blue is deeper water, the red is less water, but there's some homes that could be impacted here. I know that your staff is looking at it. You know, do you put maybe 2 inches of asphalt on the road or something? Some way of blocking that off so that that community would not be impacted by that. So that's something we are working at. But the nice thing about it is we have this before it goes out officially, that the staff can start looking at how to react to this to benefit your customers and your citizens. So let's talk a little bit of water quality, because water quality is something in impact here. We have no direct discharge to the Carson River. All our wastewater is reused. There's no discharge. However, we do have water quality issues, and they're called non-point discharge. Basically, bank erosions, ag runoff, and urban runoff. We've been trying to deal with some of these, and we've developed this low-impact development in the Carson River watershed It's a presentation that hopefully Brenda Hunt will be presenting to your planning commission and maybe to this board in the future of incorporating these kind of ideas to basically try to keep that stormwater on site and have it infiltrate into the ground versus running off and picking up sediment and polluting the river. So there's a lot of work going on to this. It was a really good study, and Brenda Hunt, who's our Carson River Coalition Watershed Project Manager, is going around presenting this. Watershed Survey. One of the things that the Carson River Coalition, working with the education outreach, realized, how much do people really know? As we do all these education outreach, there's always a question of how successful are we? But if you don't know where the starting point is, you don't know if you're successful in reaching this. So there was a grant that was we got from NDP to actually conduct a survey, and this is basically their knowledge of the literacy of your Carson River watershed. They contacted about 2,000 people, and 842 people took the survey up and down the entire watershed. So it was a pretty good turnout. I won't go into too many details. They did use cell phones and landlines. They contacted, again, 846 people. If you were under 18, however, you could not participate. If you look at a sample error, you always do this, especially in politics, it has a plus or minus of 3.36%. So it's a pretty good accurate of what people really think in this watershed. Again, this is something that Brenda Hunt will be going around giving a presentation in more detail if you're interested. There's a lot there, but a couple things here. I just want to pull a couple slides that came out of this. One of the questions was, thinking about this general area, in your opinion, what is the most important environmental issue facing the area? 62% was water-related issues. So the community was aware that water is a big issue here. So it's not like they don't think about it. But we also found in further questions is that they're not quite sure always what they can do about it. They always think there's a water issue, a water concern, but someone else needs to be dealing with it. I'm not the cause. The percentage of people who named this as the most issue, this percent of who named the following specific water-related issue as the most important environmental issue facing it, this is what they came out with. Drought was 30%. Quantity and not having enough water was 27%, and so on. So again, people have a pretty good understanding that we live in a desert. This one kind of caught our eye. Basically, it was question 41. How much would you say you know about the watershed? And he said a great deal, moderate, little, nothing at all. 70% of the people know little or nothing at all about the watershed. So there is definitely a lot of outreach out there that we can do to inform them what a watershed is and how important it is, and their actions are taken. Briefly, just what's going on in northern Nevada, because a lot of things have been going on. I'll first talk with the Humboldt watershed. If you are in the Persian Lovelock area, the last 2 years they got no water out of the Humboldt River. Those farmers 3 years ago got 10%, and the last 2, nothing. They're to the point where if they don't get water in the next 2 years, they're going to run out of crop insurance. It could basically devastate the entire Lovelock area. They are concerned that the users upstream, there's a lot of groundwater pumping near the river that are taking water that should flow in the river. They've asked the state engineer to cease all groundwater pumping in the upper watershed on the Humboldt. The state engineer indicated that he would not. They did some model runs and showed that even if they cut off all the irrigation this year, that would not add any more water to the river. And so basically you'd have the entire Humboldt area out of agriculture with no benefit to anyone. The people in the lower watershed have gotten concerned enough that they've now sued the state engineer and have asked him that he administers every groundwater basin with a perennial yield allocation in the upper watershed. So that's moving forward. It's going to be an interesting litigation as they move forward. On the Walker River, again, another dry year had some real impacts. The Walker, every groundwater basin is over appropriated, like the same here. However, they're over pumping the perennial yield also. In the Mason area, the perennial yield is about 25,000, and they pump close to, I think, 115,000. Now, they do get a lot of recharge from agriculture that helps. They call it system yield provides it. But these last couple dry years, you haven't had the river water to be irrigated, so you're not getting the recharge, and the water table is dropping significantly. The state engineer has a curtailment order out. They tried to institute one this summer. The farmers sued them, and the court basically put a hold on that lawsuit. So the court said you need to have a better plan in place so people know what to do and plan for it. They're moving forward with that. Depending on what the snowpack is on April 1st, some of these farmers could lose all their water, supplemental water rights. So again, it's something to keep track of what's going on. It has some huge impacts with that community. The Truckee River watershed, it's a little different than ours because they have a lot of upstream storage. Tumwa, which provides the Truckee Meadow Water Authority, was able to easily provide water to their customers. They did ask for a 10% voluntary cutback. They haven't touched a lot of their drought reserves. But if we have another dry year, they could be in a real world of hurt. Lake Tahoe is below the rim, and that has had a huge impact on the entire water supply that they're dealing with. On the Carson, I think of all the 4 watersheds, we were probably better off than the other 3. What's going to happen in the future? I always get these questions, and so I have to pull up my crystal ball because my guess is as good as anyone else's. But a couple things I wanted to point out. El Nino, everyone's probably heard about it. It's going to be a very strong El Nino this year, the way things are looking. The box shows where the El Nino is at. It's off South America. The dark red is the higher temperature. Basically, it's a warming of the ocean waters. Last time we've had El Ninos this large before, or high magnitude, was in 78, 79, 82, 83, some very wet years. So it could be a very wet period. The thing that's kind of throwing all the predictions off is the round circle, what they call officially the blob. This is a scientific term. And they've never had the blob before with an El Nino like this, so they're not quite sure what that may mean. It could intensify flows, or it may make them, it may actually be a high pressure keeping the El Nino off. So that's why when you hear people talking about what's going to happen this winter, no one really knows. These are some of the projections coming out. This is a 3-month look at precipitation. And if you look where we are, it says EC, equal chance. It could be wetter, drier, or normal. That's where we are in the next 3 months. However, this is the temperature. You note that we are again running into a warmer period. They anticipate that we will have warmer temperatures this next 3 months. Looking out another 3 months, basically your late winter period, it does look like we may get more precipitation. It's supposed to be wetter at that time. But again, looking at the temperature, it's going to be warmer. So as I pointed out, this year we had a lot of precipitation, but it was very warm, and we ended up in a drought. It is very possible that we could have a major flood this winter on the Carson and still be in a drought by the summer. So with all that good news, if there are any questions, and we say goodbye to 2015, hello 2016.
Thanks, Ed. That's very informative. A couple questions just to kick it off here. Is there becoming a change in when farmers plant crops? I mean, is the season changing with either the climate or with drought issues?
We have not seen that much here in this watershed yet. There are some people talking in other parts of northern Nevada looking at those changes. There was just an article that Karen Abowd gave me about what they were doing in Australia. And I had a chance to talk with the guy there of how they had to deal. They had a major drought that lasted 10 years, and they had to revamp a lot of things. Churchill County, of course, is below Lahontan, so their situation's different than the upper watershed. And they are looking at different crops. The problem is they don't have a groundwater source. So when irrigation got cut off on July 4th, they were basically out of water. They couldn't do anything. They do have some grapes down there. They have a small storage, the one Charlie Frey's winery down there. Teff is another way. It's a grain, but it uses less water. So there are some things occurring. Everyone keeps hoping that next year will be a wet year. The biggest impact, I talked to the farmers, was a lot of people couldn't replant their alfalfa fields. You know, their fields are getting old, and every couple of years they need to replant their alfalfa fields, and they have not been able to do that because of lack of water. So that ramification can impact us in the future if this drought continues.
Does the does the north-south water transmission line from Douglas through to Dayton help, or could it help Dayton in the event of a severe water shortage?
Right now, I don't know if the plumbing is fully integrated there, but there could be some benefits there. I think if you look at it, we are kind of the poster child of success. That regional pipeline that takes water from Minden, that brings it up through Douglas County, Indian Hills GID, and the Carson City, shows how cooperation can really work. And that's one reason why we aren't seeing the drought issue. Even though that pipeline was driven by water quality issues, not water supply, it really does show how we can work together. And a lot of times when I go around the state talking about these programs we have, a lot of people say, well, how can you guys work together so well? You know, they're all in litigation, constantly fighting each other, and yet we're able to do that. Carson also has an intertie with Lyon County, with the Mount House area. There's water moving back and forth. It's been very successful. I see some opportunities there, but there'll probably be something else in their planning process. I see a pipeline probably from the Dayton utilities into Stagecoach. That'll probably happen in the next couple of years. And eventually probably a pipeline from Stagecoach to Silver Springs. And looking at that, looping the entire system, there's going to be some water that has to be moved. But ultimately, we're going to have to ask the question is how much growth can we sustain before we overtax our water supply? And that's going to be something that the whole watershed as a whole is going to have that discussion.
Yeah, I think the city manager kind of briefed us and said that we're going to be looking at that exact thing about how much growth you can, you know, how much water do you really have? I mean, assuming some water, surface water is gone or next to gone, how much do we really have? So that's a good point. My last question to you is, what's happened to, or what happened to Washima Dam?
It got buried. The Washima Dam was something proposed. It was part of the Washoe project, which was authorized by Congress in the 1950s. And it was a large upstream storage that was going to store water in the Upper Carson on the East Fork. It was going to store about 160,000 acre-feet of water. It's interesting, if you ever have a chance to read Cadillac Desert, it's a great book about, you'll see in the 50s and 60s how the Corps of Engineers and Bureau Rec were fighting among each other to try to build as many storage facilities in the West. Every storage facility needed to have a benefit cost analysis. And it's amazing how you can manipulate numbers. Back in the 60s, the benefit cost analysis on the Washima Dam, which was basically just to provide water for agriculture and a little flood, was about, I think, 1.15 to 1. So it had a much better benefit, so it was justified moving forward. However, the Fed stopped pursuing that right after that study came out. They don't say it officially, but I think what happened was the Pyramid Tribe started issuing their issues of concerns at Pyramid Lake. Because the original plan was when you store water in the upper watershed, that's less water going down to Lahontan. How do you offset that water that's being stored in the upper watershed, you know, the impact on Lahontan? Well, the idea was back in the 60s and 50s, is just take more out of the Truckee because that water is being wasted, is going to Pyramid Lake. Well, we know now there's an environmental impact on that. In the 80s, because of local pressure, the Bureau Rec did another benefit cost analysis, and they came back that time and said the benefit was 0.25 to 1. So that basically killed that project. Subconservancy did a lot of studies in the 90s. I gave a presentation to my board about some of the early work done in the 90s on other storage reservoirs. The problem is any storage reservoir you build, because all the water is fully allocated in the system, the water's going to have to come from somewhere. And if you build like the Bodie Dam, if you heard where that was just downstream, it was a 50,000 acre-foot storage, you would basically have to dry up 70% of the agriculture in Carson Valley to put water behind it. Well, again, we're trying to balance now those resources, and if you were to think about Carson Valley with only 25% of the agriculture green, the rest of it brown, what it would look like in the community there. So we realized that a large upstream storage on the main fork of the Carson probably won't happen. Caveat, if climate change does materialize and becomes worse in the future, that could change the whole picture we're talking about. I do see some storage in the upper watershed, but they may be off-channel storage, smaller storage, or underground storage.
Ed, did you attend the Governor's Drought Conference?
I did.
Anything that of significance that came out of that? And by the way, thank you for a great presentation. It's excellent.
It was a 3-day forum, and basically it was bringing different communities around, talking about what they're doing with the drought, how they're dealing with less water, coming up with some ideas. It'd be interesting. I've been talking to the people who are supposed to write the report. It's going to be kind of interesting. How do you do it? A lot of people have misconceptions of what they can do. I'll give you a good example. Gray water. Gray water was talked by a couple people. We ought to do gray water. Basically, gray water is taking your water from your sinks or something, you're washing your clothes, storing it on your site, and then using it to water your own yard. Well, in California, it's not a bad idea, because if you don't, that water goes to the sewer system and goes out to the ocean. Here, our water is fully reused. So if you put a gray water system in, that means just less water going to your wastewater plant, which means less water that was going to your parks and schools or golf courses. So we already have to look at it. So you have to look at the balancing of what your plan is going to do and really is going to benefit that. And so that's something is really understanding. One of the things I thought was interesting is MGM Grant was saying that when they used to do food, they'd pull it out of the freezer and then they use water to thaw out their food for that day. And it took a lot of water. Now what they do is they plan ahead and they take it out, put it into their walk-in refrigerator, and let it thaw that way. So that saves quite a bit of water. And then some of that. So a lot of industries are already doing quite a bit up and down the entire state. Agriculture has done quite a bit. But one of the things I pointed out is everyone says agriculture ought to go like to sprinkler irrigation. If they were to do sprinkler irrigation in Carson Valley, we would have a huge impact on that groundwater, because that flood irrigation is that recharge to that groundwater basin. So you have to, again, be careful when you develop that, you're not adversely affecting another part of it. And so it's a bigger picture that you have to relook at, and every watershed is different and unique.
Ed, you mentioned that we have 100% reuse here in Carson. However, we lose a significant amount of our reuse storage out of Brunswick during the winter. Can you just briefly go over some potential opportunities for reuse, especially with the possibility of a regional transportation system for that reuse water?
Yes, I know your staff has been looking at this closely. I've had some conversations. It is a resource, and it's an opportunity. Some ideas is that water now seeps into the Carson River. You can actually see that's water flowing down there. There's going to be a need for water supply down. If it goes into the river, can you claim it? Can you then market it downstream? Because we know that Lyon County is going to need to have new growth. Maybe you can put it into a rapid infiltration basin and then pump that water out. We have not gotten to the point where you can treat it for direct use. That may be sometime in the future, but today it's not acceptable by most. Even though we can do it, we were able to do it back in the 80s easily. But it's perception. People are like, "Ooh, wait a minute, I don't want to drink this." So, you're going to have to do something where you put it in something that treats it or an alternative way, and then you can pull that water out. But it is a resource. And when I start looking at the regional water supplies, that's a major source that could be utilized, and there is a demand downstream.
Public, anybody want to weigh in? I don't see any. Well, Ed, thank you very much for a very informative presentation. We probably ought to be doing these more often as things change. So I tell your board thanks to their work too on the
Thank you.
Conservancy District. Yeah, go.
Ed, will you send us the Carson City's watershed so we can see the pumping, the same slide that you did for Churchill? Will you send us ours?
I can do that, sure.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, let's take up item number 17. We'll open up the public hearing for a discussion and possible objection or support of a lease agreement between the Carson City Sheriff's Office as lessor and Nevada Public Works Division as lessee and the Department of Safety and Nevada Highway Patrol as tenant, established by Resolution 20 on May 21st, 2015. So there's a public hearing open. Somebody, Joe, do you want to do it? Tell us what's going on here, and then we'll see if there's any public comment, or just kind of lay the set the table for us, please.
Thank you. Joe Ward from the DA's
I
office.
was going to say groundwater, but set the table, okay.
This is just a statutory mandate that the legislature requires, despite already this board approving the lease. It is water under the bridge, and there was an opportunity for public comment at that item before the approval. The resolution's in place. The Board of Examiners will look at this month in October, and this is just the formality required by the legislature to, after 2 weeks of the date of the approval by this board, to open this up one more time to give the public an opportunity to raise any objection that they might have to this NHP lease.
Okay. Everybody understand that? Sort of? Anybody want to bring the water back from under the bridge? I don't see any, because I'm going to close the hearing here, so if I don't see any hands, we're going to close the hearing. This is an informational item only. Okay, then we'll close the public hearing on this matter and move on. Okay, all right. Let's go to item 18. This is for possible action to accept a grant from the Nevada Department of Public Safety, Division of Emergency Management, Homeland Security, in the amount of $196,866 to supply the Carson City Multi-Use Athletic Center with dedicated emergency power. Chief Shreehans.
How you doing?
Why don't you tell us how you did all this? This is pretty interesting.
For the record, Bob Shreehans, Fire Chief.
This is a no match. This is $196,000, no match.
Right.
How'd you do that?
Pretty good, huh?
Not bad.
I know it.
What are the strings on that one?
Well, that took a lot of political clout. But no, basically what we did is when you guys were starting to work with this building, we went to the city and went to everybody in planning and said, hey, look, we need to make this to where we could actually use it as a shelter if we have to under the emergency management side. And we said, hey, we need to have a generator. But they came back and said, no. There's not enough money. We can't change the budget. We can't fund anything. And I think even before myself, Chief Giomi had tried to talk with those guys too about doing it, and it never got put in. So we got together with Stacy Belt back there, who didn't come up, as a deputy emergency manager. We talked together and said, hey, how can we make this happen? So Department of Homeland Security had a grant program that was open, and we applied for it. So then we had to go and testify for that, and we kind of had to compete against everybody else. And we were pretty much the ones that are looking at taking care of the public as a whole, not just specific priorities within the state. And a lot of it was all cybersecurity, and we were kind of the only ones working on this type of stuff where we could do shelter for public and issues that we have. And by accepting this grant, what will happen for us is we'll be able to actually put that generator into the MAC building, and then we can actually use that as it's going to be the only city-owned shelter. If we had to, we can put it into place. And that's what we're doing. So if you look at us right now, the high school, we don't own that. The community center doesn't have emergency power. So that's going to be the only building outside of fire stations, that kind of stuff, that we can really use for a public facility and pump in the generating power if something major happens. Like we have our big flood and lose all our power, we can use that for the building. So with that being said, this is a no-match grant, so which really kind of helps us out, so we'll be able to go ahead and do it. One of the caveats, though, is we can't put the generator in until after the building is closed out budgetarily-wise, because you can't mix funds. You can't use federal funds in the current building. So if we get this grant approved, what will happen as far as it's a 2-year grant, but we're going to do it one shot after, I think they said, in February. And plus we're also going to work with Janice, and she's going to help us take care of make sure we meet all the stuff for the grant requirements.
Very good. Well, Chief, I don't know, I suspect that this is going to go pretty well, but I want to say, hats off to you for doing this. That's a big deal, and particularly no match. And on this topic, well done. So,
All right, thank you.
Supervisor Bankowski.
Chief, to use this facility for an emergency shelter, I assume that there needs to be a plan. So does this fall under our existing emergency management plan, or will you need to do an addendum or amendment to the plan to use this specific facility?
Under the plan, we have all those things all lined out. We'll probably have to add that into that because it hasn't existed until then, so probably to answer that. But if something happened in the super near future, we could automatically implement that building. Now the city even owns the building, so that will help.
And then my final question, did you correct the item on page 9, item B?
Yeah, we did. That was from the state. The state's doing they sent it all to us, so it's corrected.
Okay, thank you.
They didn't catch it either.
Supervisor Shirk.
I'm unaware of the mistake on page 9, so could someone tell me
It
what?
just said, under the MOU, it said North Lyon County Fire Department instead of Carson City Emergency Management. So they cut and pasted their stuff. We just didn't see it.
Okay. On the placement of this emergency generator, is the wiring already in place? And
No.
So does this cover the wiring and everything that will need to attach or connect the generator?
It's supposed to, yes.
Okay.
We tried to get them to lay it, we tried to get that ahead of time, but we couldn't get it to fly. Put some conduit in the wall so we don't have to drill concrete through the wall. Yeah, no, couldn't do it. So it's going to get retrofitted in, but that's why it's a $200,000 grant.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Public comment? You got some? Supervisor Bankowski, motion's in order.
I move to accept a grant from the Nevada Department of Public Safety, Division of Emergency Management, Homeland Security, in the amount of $196,866 to supply the Carson City Multi-Use Athletic Center with dedicated emergency power.
Second.
Motion in 4 seconds. On the motion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carried unanimous. Thanks, Chief.
Thank you very much.
That's forward-looking stuff. That's good. All right. We like those no-match grants, too. Okay. Take up item 19. Anybody have any questions? Have you had a chance to look at the condition of the fund and the treasury? We have Ms. Paulson here. Anybody? Public? Hearing none. This requires a motion, doesn't it? Motion's in order.
I move to accept the report on the condition of each fund in the Treasury and the statements of receipts and expenditures through September 22nd of 2015 per NRS 251.030 and NRS 354.290.
Motion and a second on the motion. Discussion. Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carried unanimous. Okay, let's take up item 20, purchasing and contracts, 20 Alpha. This is to accept as work completed and release the final payment in the amount of $23,767.37 for contract 1415-061, titled the Sodium Hypochlorite Tank Replacement Project to KG Walters Construction. Good morning, Laura. How are you?
Good morning, I'm good, thank you. Laura Tadman, Purchasing and Contracts. This is to accept the work as completed and approve release of final payment in the amount of $23,767.37 for contract 1415-061 titled Sodium Hypochlorite Tank Replacement Project to KG Walters Construction. The bid award was for $499,500, and there was a credit of $5,152.59 in change orders, and there were no bid item adjustments, for a total project of $494,347.41.
Supervisor Shirk. Comments in order.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that I really like the new format that you're presenting the contract closeouts to us in. They're very easy to understand. You can have all the information's right there, so thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Cuts down on our questions.
That's the plan.
All right, that's the plan. Good for you. All right, public comment? Anybody? Don't see any. Motions in order.
I move to accept the work as completed, to accept the contract summary as presented, and to approve the release of final payment in the amount of $23,767.37 for contract 1415-061 titled Sodium Hypochlorite Tank Replacement Project to KG Walters Construction.
Motion and a couple seconds on the motion. Discussion. Hearing and seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Carried unanimous. Okay, let's take up 20B. This is similar to 20A. This is a release of final payment in the amount of $15,911.67 for contract 1415-156, which is the West 8th Street Sewer Replacement Project. This is the final payment to RMAC. Laura, go.
Excuse me. This is to accept the work as completed and approve release of final payment in the amount of $15,929.67 for contract 1415-156 titled West 8th Street Sewer Replacement Project to RMAC Construction. The bid award was for $147,012. There were $12,245.74 in change orders and $39 in bid item adjustments, for a total project cost of $159,296.74.
Board questions? Supervisor Shirk?
Good morning. On change order number 1, item C, it says weather days grant 3 calendar day extensions. And looking at the weather reports from that month, I don't see an extreme weather condition. Can you tell me what, I know this has come up before, so, I mean, if it's so extreme, do we have problems with city employees working outside that they're going home as well? Or why is this extension? For what reason?
The rain that we had during that time period made the area, and the soils and whatnot that we were working in just made it to where we weren't able to get out there and dig without creating a larger mess than we already had. And we were dealing with a lot of old utilities in the area, so to kind of create any additional sloughing and whatnot in our trenches, it would have created additional problems. So that's why we granted the time extension, to have them not create a larger mess than we already had.
So did your people go home then?
Yes, they did. Public Works folks didn't go home, but the contractors folks did.
Yeah, okay. All right. Further comments or questions? Public? Seeing none. Motion's in order. Supervisor Abel, go.
I move to accept the work as completed, to accept the contract summary as presented, and to approve the release of final payment in the amount of $15,911.67 for contract number 1415-156 titled West 8th Street Sewer Replacement Project to RMAC Construction, LLC.
Motion and a couple seconds on the motion. Discussion. Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Carried unanimous. Let's take up 20 Charlie. This is discussion and possible approval of contract number 1415-123 to provide a financial grade energy auditing service in an amount not to exceed $76,000 to be funded from professional services energy performance as provided after augmentation in the fiscal year 2015-16 budget. Laura, you want to just give us the financial side of this, and then we'll talk about what we're doing here.
Exactly.
Okay? All right.
This is to approve contract 1415-123 with Amoresco to provide a financial grade energy auditing service in the amount not to exceed $76,000. This is a result of an RFP. Funding will come from the Professional Services Energy Performance account in the Capital Projects Fund. This account will be augmented from carryover fiscal year 15 board designated funds with a balance of approximately $138,000. After the board review, there were noted some minor discrepancies in the contract, and staff has made those changes and will submit the contract to the recording secretary. And I know Tom Grundy, the senior project manager, is going to introduce a representative from Amoresco who's going to give a PowerPoint presentation.
Very good. I got a couple questions up here. Do you want to wait? Wait? Karen, you want to wait? Okay. Welcome. Good. Tom, you want to introduce everybody?
Yep, I'm Tom Grundy with Carson City Public Works. Everybody knows Danny Rotter.
We're used to.
This is Steve Frost from Amoresco.
Say, what's your name again, please?
Good morning, Mr. Mayor and board members. My name is Steve Frost. I'm with Ameresco. Ameresco is a national energy services company with offices in Reno and Las Vegas.
And this is the audit phase of a performance contract process. And within a performance contract, energy saving retrofits are funded out of the energy savings generated by those retrofits. A financial grade operational audit is conducted to determine the appropriate measures, and that's what this contract is for, is to conduct that audit. Financing is then arranged to construct those measures, and debt service is paid out of the savings guaranteed by the energy services company. And we selected Ameresco as the energy services company through an RFP process earlier this year. A total of 6 RFPs were submitted. Three firms were interviewed, and Ameresco came out as the leader in that process.
Danny Ryer, Public Works. Just a couple things I'll add before Steve kind of gives his presentation. This is the first step of a 2-step process, like Tom mentioned. This is just the audit. So there's a lot of details to be worked out of what the thermostat's set at and how everything's controlled and analyzed and that sort of stuff. So I know there was a few questions on that. Another thing I'll mention is that per NRS, we have a third-party oversight called Celtic Energy. We selected them early on through encouraging of the Nevada Governor's Office of Energy off their state list that they had already done an extensive RFP, had a lot of experience. And they've worked on a few projects with Ameresco before, and Tom actually, as part of researching Celtic as well as Ameresco, had talked with Henderson and Douglas County School Districts about how that process went and how the team went. And they, for one, felt Celtic was a fair third party, really representing them well as a client, and then also working well with Ameresco, having been familiar with each other before. And so then one last thing on the funding. If we get the 60% audit to the Governor's Office of Energy by the end of the year, and then submit an executed performance contract to the Governor's Office of Energy by May 27th, we get the $76,000 back in the form of a grant direct back from the Governor's Office of Energy. What we worked out with Nancy is that right now the line item contract, we would pay the $76,000 out of pocket and then just replace that back with the Governor's Office of Energy grant. There's an option to roll it into the financing, but with that 1-to-1, I don't know that we would want to pay that interest for the length of the loan.
So, Danny, am I to understand that you don't have to implement all the recommendations from the audit in order to get reimbursed?
What we would need to do is move forward with a performance contract. So it doesn't necessarily mean that we're doing all of the things in the audit, but a performance contract would need to be moved forward in order for the Governor's Office of Energy to give us that money.
Danny, the way I read the contract, it looks like we would get the $76,000 back from the Governor's Office of Energy, and that $76,000 would be credited towards the performance contract or the implementation contract. So is that correct, or am I misreading that?
The way I understood it was that we can pay the contract with the $76,000 that we have. Once we execute the performance contract, we then get that money back. There is an option to roll it into the performance contract, so we're not recommending that we do that. Maybe I misunderstood.
I could help a little bit on that, maybe. So we have an option to submit it to the Governor's Office and get reimbursement instead of rolling the $76,000 into the energy audit itself and the performance contract and refinancing it through the savings, which we're not going to do. So we won't have to recoup $76,000 in additional savings from what we implement in the audit, because we're going to take it from the Governor's Office instead. So you had that option, but we'll take the grant and keep the savings.
So that's all I have. I think Steve has some presentations here, and then we can ask questions.
Mr. Frost, go.
Thank you. This is about 3 to 4 minutes, and then there'll be some time for questions if you'd like.
We're going to
afterwards.
audit your presentation, so do well.
All right, I'll do that. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so initially, as part of the RFP, we were asked to look at these 8 buildings. And when we looked at these 8 buildings, we found out that the total electricity and natural gas annual expenditure was over $700,000, and that's per year. The potential annual savings we found through a number of measures, which I'll share with you in a minute, came out to about 39% or up to $285,000 per year. So what is this energy performance contract that we as an ESCO or energy services company do? What is that? How does it work and how does it benefit you as a client? Well, first of all, this is a design build program and it's designed to be self-funded, meaning that the lease that is a tax-exempt municipal lease typically that would be garnered to fund this project would have its cash flow paid back over the term of the lease, sometimes 15, 16, 17 years. And it would be a guaranteed saving stream by us, and it's both an integrated solution that includes the operation and the operational savings, as well as the performance of the equipment that we're putting in for the full term of the agreement, working with your team to make sure that things are maintained and last the way they're supposed to be, and then on an annual basis coming back and making sure the savings are materializing as we promised. So the timeline of how we got to where we are right now started back in January with the RFP. Then we went through some interview processes. We were selected back in April. Then the city needed to, as mentioned, hire the third-party contractor, Celtic Energy. Then they were brought on board, and we had our kickoff meeting back in July, and we've been working back and forth on getting all the documents ready for you to be able to review at this meeting and possibly approve for this audit agreement. And now we're here on October 1st, and as mentioned earlier, we are shooting for a December 31st 60% audit report to basically, we've already told the Governor's Office of Energy that we're planning on submitting this, and they've earmarked monies for your refund or your unmatched grant that I heard you like, Mr. Mayor. And this 60% audit, once we submit that will basically lock in your funding. And then all we have to do as a team is come together with the agreement and the financing in place. And we're shooting for a May 5th board meeting to be back in front of you after staff's all approved everything. And then work on getting all the agreements in place by May 20th so that we can submit it with time for the May 27th deadline the Governor's Office of Energy has.
Steve, what's potential liability to the city entering into this? I mean, it looks, I think on the top line, there's probably no liability because there's a guarantee of the cost to install the upgrades.
Okay, so full disclosure, if we're talking about liabilities or risk on your part, one risk that you would have, and I think you're aware of this, but I'll say it right away, is if you approve $76,000 today and we go forward and we come up with a program that is self-funding and everything makes sense and it complies with state law, and you change your mind for whatever reason, you won't get the reimbursement from the state and you'll end up paying the $76,000 to us. Now what I'll say is the reason we do this is to make sure that we get a chance in audience with you and you're paying attention and you know what your risks are and we're going in with our eyes open, right? Because if someone says, hey, we'll give you a free audit, everybody's going to take that and then we'll end up doing a bunch of work and your staff will be all tied up and you won't end up with anything, and that's probably not in the best interest of Carson City and its taxpayers. So by getting involved in this and making sure everyone knows what we're doing up front, that's the best way to ensure we have minimized risk.
Yeah, and after that, I'm talking about, I assume that we enter into the performance contract. What's the risk to the city during the term of the lease or after that? What's the risk to the city?
Okay, so one of the biggest risks is if we're installing equipment and you're not paying us to maintain it, but we agree with your staff, this maintenance needs to happen to make sure this equipment runs and functions the way it's supposed to function, and you don't appropriate the funds to maintain the equipment, then it doesn't work properly for the full term, then you're basically, that deferred maintenance will result in you having a cash flow deficit to make the lease payments. Does that make sense? To me, that's the one risk that you have on your side, that I've seen that if it's not addressed at this point and it's not included in the thought process early on before the construction agreement is approved and the scope of work is approved, then that can fall through the cracks, and we don't want that to happen.
Yeah, let me just, and I got a couple questions up here, but let me just kind of encapsulate it like this. If the city, if we do this and the city performs, would I be correct in understanding that there's no real out-of-pocket cost to the city? We're getting reimbursed the grant, we're getting the cost of the energy upgrades is being guaranteed, not through the energy savings. So as long as we perform on our side, there's really no out-of-pocket cost to us. Is that right or wrong?
That is correct. By state law, we're required to guarantee that the positive cash flow is there in each and every year, meaning the savings is more than what your debt service is for each of the years of the financing.
Okay. I don't know who's next. Karen, then.
The question I have, Steve, is that of the buildings outlined that you're going to be looking at, it seems to indicate that some are a full audit and some are a partial audit. Which ones and why?
Correct. And if we could just go, there's a next, let's skip one forward on this slide. So this is what we're talking about is how do we come about the $76,000 number, I think is another way of asking this. So full audit pricing means it's a complex building that has air conditioning systems, control systems, lighting, and operational issues that are inside that building that are going to require a fair amount of work to get in there and come up with the guaranteed savings and the scope of work, right? If we have buildings like, help me with the exact building if you would.
One of the truck barns at Public Works that just basically has lighting in it is a partial building, and the MAC is a partial building. Building controls were taken out of the MAC project in order to cut the costs. And through this project, we think the payback on installing building controls into the MAC will be about 10 years. So, but the MAC wouldn't be a full analysis. It would just be analysis for building controls.
So that's the purpose of the partial half pricing, basically, is we don't have to do as much work there, so we're not going to charge you as much to do that work on those buildings. And we'll go back up a slide. So back when we were saying there's a potential for $285,000 worth of savings at these 8 buildings across the top here in this matrix, we call this an energy conservation measures matrix. Then down the left-hand side, we have a various number of measures there. I would lump those into categories of lighting, air conditioning and heating, some work at the pool. We're going to be evaluating solar, and we're going to be looking at some streetlight opportunities to go to LEDs for you as well. And then in addition to what you see on these 8 buildings, I think we're up to about 25 buildings. Is that right now?
A total of 26 buildings.
26 buildings. Okay, and that total square footage over 500,000 square foot that we had showed on that other slide.
So I did have a question on that because I see that the Northgate Complex and Fuji Park were not included on our list here, and I'm just curious why.
Northgate Complex wasn't included because we don't pay the energy bills at the Northgate Complex. And Fuji wasn't included just because we didn't feel there was enough use at Fuji to include it. You know, there's the exhibit hall that gets used once in a while in the restrooms, but that's about all that really consumes energy at Fuji Park.
Okay, we talked about this right here, and then that's the end of the slide that I had intended on presenting to council today.
Okay. Questions? Go.
All right. I think that this is a good idea, especially considering there's very little downside to us. My first question is, looking long-term, so this looks at all of our buildings at a point in time today, and then we come up with a plan, we implement the plan. Is that creating a bubble 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road, where everything's going to age out, the equipment is going to age out at the same time? And if so, how does this program perpetuate itself going forward? So what do we do long term? We're taking an action today. Where does that lead us in the future to make sure that we stay cutting edge on energy conservation and continue to reap the savings?
All right, I like that question. It's actually more involved than most questions I get along those lines. But I think I might say is that, one, it's good to realize that if you have you have a bubble right now, a deferred maintenance bubble right now, because you have equipment that's 25 and 30 years old. We're basically helping you with that bubble. But when we help it now, what does that mean? That means in 15 years, there's going to be another bubble. And so what we have seen successfully is with a lot of our clients, Douglas County School District, Washoe County School District, City of Reno, City of Henderson, we've done multiple phases with them, right? And so typically what happens is equipment we'll do what we call low-hanging and medium-hanging fruit in this agreement, and it'll help work us 15 years forward. But we'll also identify measures that don't quite make the financial cutoff at this point, but probably will in 6, 7, or 8 years, because then they'll be old enough and you'll be putting so much money into maintaining it, it might make sense to do the next phase. And so this system lends itself to periodic revisiting in multiple phases to help prevent a bubble like you have right now from reoccurring. That doesn't mean you're not going to have a $2, $3, $4 million bubble in 15 years, but it will help decrease that amount of the $4 million budget by periodically addressing that as we move forward in the term of the agreement. Does that make sense?
It does, and I assume that incorporates technology changes as well.
Right, and so this is one of the questions I do get a lot, and it's similar to, well, how do you make your own personal decision to buy a new personal computer for home, right? Because every 6 months, or a new cell phone, every 6 months there's a new one. Why should I do it now? In this particular case, this isn't something that you need for productivity or for fun. This is something that makes sense financially right now given today's technology. So compared to what you're doing right now, if you make this decision now, it's financially viable. Now what that means is if new technology comes along, you won't get that new technology without paying some additional money, but you will also have had the benefit of the savings paying for that over whatever the time period is from now to when you would make that next technological change. Now what we have seen, like for instance lighting, for instance, some of these customers we've talked to you about, like Washoe County School Districts, we moved from the large 1-inch T12 lamps, fluorescent lamps, to T8s back 6, 7, 8 years ago. Now they're getting ready to put an RFP on the street, and all schools are now moving to LEDs. That 15-year financing or cash flow analysis for those T8 lamps isn't complete. But what I will tell you is that even though they haven't fully paid off those lamps, we're comparing putting in new technology that will save so much extra money than their existing technology that you still have the basic cash flow stream from the savings from the first change from T12 to T8. That's persistent. And then I have so much extra cash flow that I can now fund these new LED lighting. So can you see how you can still bring technology in as long as it makes cash flow sense even in later years?
Right, as long as the cash savings exceeds the capital expenditure.
Exactly.
To me, this entire proposal comes down to one line on page 32 on attachment A, which says, discuss the willingness and capability of owner to make capital contributions to the project to improve the economics of the overall project. What that translates into is that we as a board need to be fully committed to this program, or as you said earlier, it's going to fail somewhere in the middle. So I would like us, I'm talking to the rest of the board here, to discuss our willingness to be 100% committed to this today, next year, and 10 years from now to make sure that before we start down this road, that we're going to do this and we're going to continue to do this into the future.
Lori, and then Jim.
So just some potential corrections. On page 32, on 10D, the 90% document will be submitted on or about 2/29/16, not 15.
That has been corrected.
Okay. And then you've got on the next page 33, F, it's party, and then the date on G, you got all those fixed?
Yes, correct.
Okay. And then to Brad's comment, I think what ends up happening, and I'd really like it if you could email us the slide that showed each of the potential ECMs that you had. If you could put that slide back up. Actually, I think that will open up the discussion that Supervisor Bonkowski is having. If you look at that, the potential is when you give us back the audit, each of those ECMs will be identified for each of the buildings with a cost for them and then the potential savings. There will be opportunities that some of those may or may not cost out. The overall project will, but there may be some items itself that do not pencil. So you decide whether to put them in or out of the project as a whole. So there's opportunities for us to decide if something's of benefit, even if its cost is like, you save a dime, but it still might be a good functional thing to do for staff or for safety or other issues. And so that'll be some opportunities. Is that what you meant by the board could be committed and maybe we could put a little bit of money in, or we're willing to accept a zero-sum game on a particular project?
Right, that's exactly what I'm talking about, because sometimes when we're in there and we're doing some major retrofits in, say, a central plant or something, and you say, hey, while you're in there and you got all the pipes torn out, I think we should have you fix this. And I go, well, if I fix that, that's not going to save any energy, and so I'll do it, but that's going to be a capital item, and you're going to need to match it with the capital funds. And that's what we're talking about, is being smart about advancing some work you're going to have to do eventually, maybe in the next 5 years. It may make sense to advance it because we can actually save you money because we've already done some of the work anyway, because we've already got staff in there, we've got local contractors working on it, we've got something torn apart, and we might as well take care of it while we're in there.
Similar to the discussion we had earlier with the MAC, we should have put the conduit in to allow the wiring for a generator, and that would have saved us overall dollars.
I just want, and to Brad's comment too, we will have this report back before our final budget is approved so that we can look at this in terms of priority and decide what expenditures are valid to go forward with. Okay.
Supervisor Shirk.
Could you move to the very first slide you opened this with? And while you do that, has any studies been done on the MAC and the animal shelter about energy savings costs for those prior to the construction start? Have we done a study of how to improve saving money on those two buildings?
Not that I'm aware of, with the exception of building controls for the MAC. We did a real cursory overview of the MAC and said, we think if we add building controls to the MAC, the payback period might be around 10 years.
I'll also add one more of those, that both of those are meeting a new energy code as compared to some of these older buildings. So already built in by itself, while certain higher technical building controls we're looking to do, the basic controls are there that meet the new energy code. So there's already some savings there as well, just in new construction.
Okay. And on this, who selected the 8 buildings?
I did. And we just kind of selected those as big buildings and kind of a broad mix of buildings for the city, just for the purposes of the RFP, to give everybody a level playing field and kind of know what to expect.
And these are the potential buildings that we're going to be looking at the cost savings on?
This was just for the RFP. So we sent this out and said, hey, these are 8 of our 26 buildings as a representative sample. We're not going to send out 6 different companies to look at 26 buildings, but we wanted them to take a look at 8. So they came out, did some tours, looked at some of the equipment, but only on these representative samples.
And maybe in the future, if it's possible, these, when you present this would be great to have in our package as well, and for also the community to have as part of the package. I do want to go back to Lori and ask a question. You had some, in the contract you said there's some corrections. Will you be forwarding what all those corrections are to all board members?
I printed them. If you'd like a copy, I can.
Sorry?
I made a list of the few that were changed, the corrections.
Do we have that list?
I have them here. I can give them.
Go ahead. Yeah. Well, we're approving something without knowing all the corrections.
Okay, public comment? Anybody? Board, ready?
Well, I'd like to
Sure,
read the
just-
corrections first before you make
Go
the
ahead.
motion. Thank you. Thank you.
Motion's in order, go.
I move to approve contract number 1415-123 titled Performance Contract for Energy Operating Cost-Saving Measures Financial Grade Audit with Amoresco, Inc. for an amount not to exceed $76,000.
To include the changes.
Incorporating the typographical changes that were just passed out.
Okay, there's a motion and a second on the motion. Discussion? Hearing and seeing none. I think, Jim, your light on?
Sorry.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carried unanimous. Okay, thank you. All right. All right, we're going to be in recess for 10 minutes, and then we'll take up the Planning Commission appeal. We're in recess. We're going to call the meeting of the Board of Supervisors back to order. We're going to take up item 21. This is 21 Alpha. This is an appeal of the Planning Commission's approval of a request from Bethlehem Lutheran School for a special use permit to allow the addition of classrooms to an existing school and modification of the school site playground and outside sports areas on property zone single-family 6,000 located at 1845 Mountain Street. Okay, so this is an appeal from a Planning Commission decision. Everybody listen up a little bit carefully here. This is how these work. This is kind of quasi-judicial where the rights of not only the applicant but the appellant are an issue. So I want to, this is not, it's an appeal, it's not a second bite at the apple. I mean, so what that means is, limit your comments to why the Planning Commission was wrong or right, given what it had in front of it. Because if new evidence comes in here, it's going to go back to the Planning Commission. So we try and avoid that. And we try and avoid that because hopefully nobody withheld anything at the Planning Commission, so the Planning Commission had everything before it to make a decision. The way we do this is that we'll open up the hearing, we'll have the staff give the recitation of the history, what its report is on this issue. Then I'm going to go to the appellants, and there's two of them. Mr. Fesser, is that correct? Is that stated? Pardon me? Phaser, excuse me, I'm sorry, Phaser, and Ms. Barbara Nichols. Good morning to both of you. So then, and then we'll have the applicant, who's speaking on behalf of the applicant? Mr. Kopolis, you're on that. And then when he's done, we'll go back to the appellants again for a final shot. Remember, try and keep your comments to why the action of the Planning Commission was or was not correct. And I could suggest to you one thing that might be helpful to particularly the appellant. You'll notice in the staff, in the package that went out to folks, to all of us and to the public, where the staff gave their answers anyway, to the appellant's concerns and statements. You might want to start, and it's just a suggestion, by saying whether you agree with that or you disagree with it or why the staff is wrong, because we look at those things, we have those in front of us. You might want to start there, but you don't have to, okay? Everybody okay with all that? All right. All right, so we're going to go. We're going to call on the staff. Ms. Susan Dorpansky, go and tell us where the history of this and go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the record, Susan Pansky, Planning Manager. This is an appeal, as the Mayor mentioned, of the Planning Commission's decision to allow an addition to the existing school for classrooms and the relocation of the playground equipment and sports courts to accommodate that addition. This project, for those who are not aware, is located on Mountain Street. It's just north of the Fritch School and south of the Ivy Street residential area. Another aerial of that project area. And you'll see in this aerial, the existing sports courts are in the parking lot on the west side of the current building. The playground area is to the north of the current school building, and those areas are being relocated as a part of this plan that was approved by the Planning Commission. Just a quick slide showing what the school addition looks like, and then the plan that was originally proposed by the applicant. So in this plan, you'll note that the new classrooms are being proposed at the north of the existing building, and the relocated sports courts were to have been located in front of the parsonage building, just at the end of Ivy Street where it terminates. And the playground would have been to the east of that. There was significant testimony at the Planning Commission meeting in August that led the Planning Commission to make modifications to the approval that would allow for the applicant to relocate the sports courts and the playground to the south end. This is the revised plan the applicant has proposed as a result of those conditions, moving the sports courts and the playground to the south as a result of the testimony that was heard at the Planning Commission. There were 3 conditions that were placed on the from the Planning Commission onto the applicant as a result of that testimony. The first, the applicant shall revise the plan to show that pedestrian access directly to Ivy Street shall be limited to emergency access only. At the Planning Commission, there was significant testimony about parents that have students in the school that use Ivy Street for pickup and drop-off of their students, even though the school has repeatedly told them that they are not to do that. So to mitigate that problem, the Planning Commission said, okay, we will place a condition that says this is emergency access only so that students are not able to get in and out and access from that side. The second, the applicant shall revise the plan to relocate the sports courts and playground to the southerly property line. Again, the site plan that I have up on the screen now shows where it's being relocated, and that was a result of significant testimony by the surrounding property owners indicating that they felt it would be a negative impact on their property to have these relocated to the northeast corner. And finally, construction traffic shall use the Mountain Street driveway entrance. There was testimony stating concerns that construction traffic using Ivy Street would be disruptive to the neighborhood, and they wanted to make sure that that would be as minimal as possible. The applicant agreed to that condition, but staff noted, and the applicant as well, in that meeting that while that would be appropriate for all of the construction on site, if they were to move forward with the abandonment, which I believe they do, there will be improvements involved with that, and they would need to access Ivy Street a little bit, but would try to make that as minimal as possible. And that concludes my presentation. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Go.
What you were just referring to, Susan, with regards to Ivy Street and the section abandoned, that would be to mitigate drainage issues that have existed in the past?
The abandonment itself wouldn't be specifically to mitigate the drainage issues. However, as the abandonment moves forward, we would require that those drainage issues be mitigated as a part of that process.
Going back to the same question, the flooding that is there, would it be the city overseeing and making sure that is corrected, or is it the applicant?
Danny Rotter, engineering manager for the record. Multiple ways to skin the cat.
You might not want to use that.
Maybe not want to use it.
I used it and got pretty...
Multiple ways to adopt a cat. Is that better? Okay.
I learned the hard way.
Okay. The original plan that came in with the problem that is that originally that was a subdivision that the drainage was all going to come down to the end of the cul-de-sac and out at the southeasterly corner. So at some point in time that didn't happen, and you see the curb lines ending at those yellow lines right there. One of the pictures that Mr. Pfizer sent in is that easterly curb line has basically a channelized flow, and then it hits dirt that's not graded, and so it spreads out right there. And so when the proposition came forward to put the more pavement solutions there's a chance to grade that out and channelize it with a valley gutter or something like that. During the Planning Commission, when they swapped it, they've indicated, hey, we can make that work. Also, we'll just have to shift the detention basin, and then either way, we'll be able to make that work. It's probably continuing a valley gutter or a gutter or some sort of paving down into the detention basin to accept that, rather than having that just at grade dirt. So both ways that they've presented it would have worked. It's just a matter of engineering after the fact. It's not really a special use or a special condition. It just needs to be happen, and that's usually coming in final engineering phase with building permits. Does that answer your question?
That'll be forthcoming then?
Correct.
Within the time frame that we're doing all the other work, or somewhere similar to that?
Correct.
On this picture frame, can you show us where everything is going to be relocated, the classrooms, and where the new playground is going in and so forth?
Sure. On this photo, the existing sports courts are in the parking lot, and the existing playground is north of the school. The proposal originally was for the sports courts to be located basically where this cul-de-sac terminates, and then the playground would be located immediately to the east. The condition that the Planning Commission placed required that the applicant move the sports courts and the playground to the south, which would be here, adjacent to Fritz School. The sports courts would be on the west side of this lawn, and then the playground would be on the east side of the lawn.
And then near that one home at the top, there, that's just going to remain as it is now, as I drove by it yesterday?
Is this the home you're referring to?
The one to the right?
This one, okay. I believe that's Mr. Fazer's home. And yes, the improvements in front of that are, they're not proposing any changes in front of his house. They are proposing abandonment of the cul-de-sac up to basically the driveway of the parsonage, which is this property here to the left, but they're not proposing abandonment in front of any adjacent properties.
What's the purpose of abandoning that strip that's in front of the parsonage? What does that gain them or us? I mean, why abandon it?
Danny Rotter, it would make it so that it's private property and it's no longer on our tax rolls and our responsibilities, because right now we'd be responsible for turf areas that are within that bulb. So we thought that was the best move for everybody in abandoning it.
So the relocation of the existing actually moves it further away from residents. As it sits today, you're moving it away from 1, 2, 4 houses, moving it to an area where it's not adjacent to a property owner. Is that correct?
We're moving it away from the residents on Ivy Street. There are still residents on the street to the east that have their yards to the rear, but the number of residents affected would be less as a result of it being closer to the Fritz School.
Go.
And this proposed plan and the school planning, this has been on the books for 30 years or more?
I think that question might be better for the applicant, because I don't know how long they've had this plan.
All right, thank you.
What did the Planning Commission say, or was it brought up about fencing?
With regard to the
Anywhere on
type?
Yeah, well, fences in general, where will fences be?
Let me get back to that slide. A fence is proposed right across the right-of-way in front of the parsonage and then up the side of the existing Ivy Street. Specific information on the type of fencing was not discussed at the Planning Commission.
And on that map right there, where's Mr. Fazer's property?
Mr. Fazer.
Did I pronounce that correct?
Yes, Mr. Fazer's property, I believe, is here, and I believe Ms. Nichols' property is here. Nicholas, I apologize.
So is there a fence going east and west along the northern boundary of the property right now?
Yes, on both sides.
On both
There's
sides.
a fence in this location and a fence in this location.
Okay. And what's the potential use of that cul-de-sac? And what use could the city make of that? What are the potential uses?
You could pave it over and have a turnaround. Then you got to work out the drainage with the drainage basin. I don't see a whole lot of use for the city in that aspect. There's not a whole lot of drainage infrastructure in the area anyways, so we would have to be working with this property and through Fritch if we were going to do some sort of extensive piping system.
Who's using the property right now?
The school is right now.
Okay. Anything else, board, with the staff? We can go. Okay, who wants to go first? Ms. Nichols or Mr. Fazer? Come on up. Both of you, come on up. Sit down at the table up there. You have to push the button on the front to turn the red light on, and then when one of you gets done, it's like, I always forget up here, if you leave your red light on and the other one starts talking, it mutes. It's not particularly, you just can't hear it as well. So
Well, thank you very much for hearing us this morning. My name is Jared Fazer. I'm the property owner at 1853 Ivy Street. I wasn't sure if I would have an opportunity to use a computer, so I had printed out some photos here, some discussion points that I'd like to pass out, if you don't mind.
Not a problem.
Make sure I have my own here. Thank you.
Mayor, would you like to mark these as an exhibit?
Excuse me, I would.
That would be Exhibit 1.
Okay, 1. Everybody got it? Got it? Go ahead.
Thank you. Just to start, I wanted to introduce that, I've been an associate engineer with the Nevada Department of Transportation for the past 11 years, working in engineering and also some planning. So, I don't feel that, what I'm going to present is necessarily raving. I feel that there's some sound pieces to this that, just a lot of stuff that was left unanswered and that questions that we wanted answered. During the meeting, we feel like an original plan was proposed by the school. The residents were able to view that and comment on it. During the comment period, we feel the plan was changed. It was moved to the south, and then we were only allowed very brief comment after that, and then we were cut off, and then the plan was approved. We feel that once this plan was moved to the south, it kind of became a new plan. They were no longer using the same abandonment piece of land. If you look through some of the plans, things have changed since the original plan that weren't on the original plan. So we feel we never got a chance to actually comment on the approved plan itself. We only got to comment on a plan that was not approved.
Let me ask you, should I call you Jared or Mr. Fields?
You can call me Jared. Thank you.
That frequently happens in a planning commission because they're trying to make a Solomon's decision to try and make both sides happy. So it frequently happens that during the public hearing, there will be changes made to a plan to accommodate public input. That's apparently what was done in this case. So it's not unusual to say, okay, we want to do these things, because that's what we're hearing the residents say they want to have done. So I'm not certain, where you want to go with that argument, because they're trying to make sure that, that they accommodated what they heard during the planning commission. So from the public, but go ahead, Jared, go.
Okay, well, it's kind of, coming here, like I said, we felt it was a failure on their part to not table this to another meeting so that we had time to review a new set of plans and then be able to comment on that. If you look at photo 1 there, I've marked what is the southern property line, and, according to the conditions of approval number 25, it states that the project's to be moved to the southern property line. And according to the original permit, that no trees would be disturbed. Well, we have trees about 12 feet north of the southern property line. Another photo that I've seen, it's also in here, shows the plan then about 20 feet from the southern property line. So to us, it feels like it's already ignoring the Planning Commission's decision. Stuff is creeping further north. So if we had had time to review these plans, this is something I could bring to the Planning Commission's attention. But we never had that opportunity.
And the staff replied to that issue. That one, there'd be no trees that are going to be pulled down, right? And that it's moved to the southern edge of the property. That condition hasn't changed to my knowledge.
Well, if you look at photo 2 here, it shows it 20 feet from the southern property line, and that's just planning, we don't know, are there roots in that area? Is it gonna have to move further north? What I'm trying to see is where is this actually gonna be? They approved this plan without knowing exactly where these courts are gonna be. They just moved them to the south, and then all of a sudden they're moving further north again. They're coming closer to our residents again. We still don't know if this is gonna be the area they're able to do that.
Okay.
It could still keep moving further north.
I think I got you. Let me just ask this question. Does your concern go away if the condition is followed to the letter of its statement? On this issue, on the location of the playground, does your concern go away if they conform exactly to the statement, to the condition?
The problem I see there is they can't conform to both. They can't be on the southern property line and not disrupt trees. So nobody really looked at this, is what I'm
not trying to argue with you. I just want to get clear in my own mind here, because what I understand is, and we'll hear from the applicant as well, no trees are going to be disturbed. The condition requires the playground to get moved to the southern property line. And all my question to you is, if that happens, like that, does your concern go away on that issue?
This concern would, because then it sticks to what I guess the Planning Commission has has already approved.
Well, we'll see how far that. We'll hear from the applicant on that, Jared.
Okay.
So, okay. And I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. I'm trying to figure out where we're going here.
Okay.
All right.
Well, and like I said, I've got a number of issues, and they were questions that I tried to propose after this new plan was proposed, and I just felt like no one could give me any answers on those. But yet this plan was still approved with me having a number of questions.
Okay.
If you look at this new plan on photo 2, from what I'm seeing is the pink line going around the boundary is what they're estimating as being their property line after the abandonment. And then on photo 3, you can see I've kind of highlighted the abandonment area in blue, and then a portion of my property there in red. The property in red was purchased by a previous homeowner. It was 10 feet of land from the church, probably before I was born. But, that's one of the reasons I bought this house is it has RV access there. But with this abandonment, it now cuts off of that portion. It's a driveway. I would have to drive over private property in which to access my own driveway, which was once city property.
You got to help me understand that one. Tell me how that would happen.
I'm sorry?
I don't follow that argument.
You're 10 feet.
How would you have to cross private property to get
if this blue parcel in photo 3 here, if this blue parcel is given to the church, then I would have to drive. I've got a driveway right there in that jog, in that red highlighted area. I would have to, from the street, I would have to drive over private property to get into that driveway. And, I asked this question during the meeting. Now that this court is being moved off of city land, why does the church still need this land? I use that to access a driveway of mine.
Okay.
If you look at photo 4, I supplied this photo of the flooding in the area. This was a photo taken just this year. It was a few days before Memorial Day. It was only like a 15-minute storm. I apologize for the photo quality. But, that's a lot of water that uses that land currently as its detention. That's where it goes. It pools up in front of my driveway, and then you can see it kind of it has eroded out its own little area in that dirt parcel, and when I met with Mr. Koplos, he talked about, paving that depending on, where the grades go, which would be how it would be, the paving would be graded. Well, I see it as it grading back towards my land. So now I'm at the low spot from all the way from up Mountain Street and then the church property. So I'm just gonna have more pooling up here. Mr. Koplos had stated that nobody from the city had talked to him about a drainage easement. These were just all questions was trying to get to the Planning Commission. It's like, how are we going to deal with this issue if you give this land to them? And Nobody can answer my question.
Was that answered by the staff report? Did you see the staff report, Jared?
I did, but
And the staff, I mean, here's the staff report says that the drainage issue is going to be addressed when they get a building permit?
okay, but like I said, but that's stuff that I didn't get to hear until after I filed an appeal.
Right, I got you.
You know, it was still something that they approved without any knowledge of.
Well, let me just ask it like this. My understanding was that on the drainage side of stuff, I agree with you that, you know, the current situation of the drainage would be unacceptable to me. What I see happening here, though, is if this is granted, that drainage problem is going to be ameliorated at least. We'll hear from the applicant on that one, and I'm going to hear from the applicant on the location of the abandonment issue on your driveway. So we'll hear from them on those.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
If you look at photo 5 here, this was a caption from the original plan that was proposed, and it showed the new 6-foot-high fence going across that dirt lot area. I asked, because that was the only place that it was specified in the plans, where exactly is this going to go? And they told me it was going to tie into the existing fence that's currently there, a 4-foot-high chain link fence going around, and that, you know, in the northeast part of the property meets up with a little 2-foot-high wood fence that I have just to separate property lines. So that was what was told to me in the meeting. But then when I see new set of plans after my appeal is filed, I see a new 6-foot-high chain link fence that's represented there in the lines with the X's, not only going across that dirt lot, but then down towards my property and then all the way across my property line. You know, this is stuff that's being added after a plan has been approved. You know, if this was a part of the new plan that was put in front of a planning commission, then I would have been able to comment on this. But the way it is, I had to come and appeal to even get a set of plans, a new set of plans, and I wasn't able to comment on this in front of the planning commission. You know, to me, this is all stuff that needs to be put in the original plans, and if it's approved by the planning commission, then that's the way it stays. But
do you object to the fence?
I do object to the fence.
Why?
If you look at photo 7 there, you know, that's the view from my property. So now I'm going to have a 6-foot-high chain link fence, you know, right next to my little fence. You know, I don't want to feel like I'm living in a prison yard. You know, we've got basketball courts, we've got 6-foot-high chain link fences, and now the church's new thing of using megaphones during PE time. You know, it's really making this to where it's not a nice place to live anymore. You know, I bought this property for one big reason, is because I had this nice big chunk of open space next to me. It gave me the illusion of space. It wasn't my property, but it gave me space. And now I feel like everything's creeping in on me and encroaching in on me there.
I have a question for staff. Don't our design standards allow for a 6-foot tall rear fence on property lines?
Yes, and side as well.
Okay. So the property owner, any adjacent property owner would have the right to put up a 6-foot fence.
Okay. But I mean, is that in a neighborhood, are they allowed to do that all the way down to the street?
As it gets closer to the street, it has to go down to 4 feet, but to the setback line, it can be 6 feet.
Okay. That's a part of your standards, but it's not something that I like, you know, right next to my home. I don't think anybody would like it right on their property line, really.
But as a part of our standards, it's really not part of the conversation. If it's allowed, it's allowed.
Okay. But part of my issue with it is that it was put in the plan after. Like, we were never able to negotiate, you know, any of this. We've tried numerous times. We tried to work with the planning commission. We tried to contact the school and work with them, and nobody wanted to work with us. You know, it was just, well, it's approved, so that's all you can do about it. We just don't feel that this was handled the correct way. We feel that we should have been given opportunity to view these new set of plans and comment on those in a public meeting. And to me, that wasn't done.
And I have a question for staff. Any property owner could put a fence up that wouldn't have to take out a permit or go to the planning commission and to do what this is saying they're going to do, put up a 6-foot fence, would they?
That's correct. As long as they follow our design standards, then they could do it without a building permit if it doesn't exceed 6 feet. And I just want to clarify, both of the plans show the fence in the exact same place, the original plan and the new plan, as indicated on the exhibits that Mr. Fazer has provided.
Yeah, I don't see the fence location in the original plan. Okay, then that's a different one. That's the new plan.
Okay.
The original plan, I'm sorry, I think is photo, what, 5? Yeah, in photo 5, it only shows it going across the dirt lot. I don't see it continuing up along my property line.
Photo 5 says new 6-foot high fence and then has a line type with X's on it. Photo 6 says new 6-foot high fence and has a line type with X's on it. So I think you need to hear from the applicant as to what's there, because it was shown in photo 5, pretty much the same way, but just a little bit smaller X's, so.
Yeah, okay, because I can't see the X's there.
Okay. Okay. Barbara. Can I call you Barbara?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay.
Go.
I bought my home a year ago knowing the current situation. I came to that meeting also, and we started to express some of our concerns, and I guess due to a time constraint, we really didn't get to express the things that I'm going to be saying now. After that meeting, it was vague. They said, well, we'll just flip it to the south boundary. But I knew that there were trees at least 12 feet from that south boundary, and all the other things that might have made this move more palatable. I thought it would be good. We all thought, let's talk to the principal, Mr. Kargas, to see if we could work out some of these things. I called him and he just said, there's no reason to meet because we already know, we just have to flip it to the south. But there was nothing, the proposal had no amount of footage. It didn't address the tree issue. I had wanted to talk about concerns about security, the type of fence, landscaping that's mentioned in there at 40%. I don't even know what that means. A lot of the things that that I expressed in my letter of concern, I thought maybe we could work with the church so it wouldn't become this kind of appeal. But it was made clear that that wasn't going to happen. Then they offered to meet with us to meet with the architect, Mr. Kopolos, and he did that. He came to the area and we spoke with him, but he really had no additional facts about footage, fencing, nothing like that. And there's a lot of issues with the basketball court. One of the planning commission members, I don't recall his name, owned a home for quite a while, and they built a school near him with a basketball court. And I think everybody knows that with a basketball court, it's a great thing for kids. They want to play there. He actually said adults come. So we bought in a very quiet, no outlet street, which even though the school doesn't allow, as Jared said, people to be dropped off and picked up there, they still do it. but nobody really complained. But when this proposal happened, the original court was going to be right next to our homes, and they did move it to the south, but it was very vague south boundary, but there's really no details, as I said, with how far south, and maybe they will move it even farther north, but it's pretty much in our backyards now. The, there's an issue about kids and adults coming around Ivy to climb this 6-foot fence to use the court off hours. Even now, the play equipment is used in the evenings, in the summer, late into the evening. And it's like it's becoming a public park. There's a basketball, there's play equipment, and it's going to be right by our houses. Even the proposed fence will bring their play area 40 feet closer than it already is. So, and none of these things, when I tried to come up here to express some of this, and everybody tried to talk about their concerns, they said, okay, one more comment. It was the agenda, but still, because there was a full agenda, it meant that we should have been able to at least gotten another chance to go through all these concerns that were never addressed and to this day are not addressed. It might make a huge difference if they're going to do this with the type of fence. Could it be, there's going to be noise from basketball, bouncing all the time now. And I had brought up that several of the people on that block have issues why they bought in a quiet, no outlet area, myself included. And now there's going to be a lot more noise and probably traffic. They don't enforce the pickup and drop off. I don't see them addressing security where it will say no trespassing. I think making a fence that's either block or at least closed off to the area with landscaping might make a huge difference. None of that was even addressed. So, it seems like it was so premature to just kind of approve it just because they were out of time. And that's why we appealed. And there's question of signage. It really should say, no trespassing to try to keep the evening and all weekend. Weekends are quiet now because nobody uses that land. But if there's a basketball court, kids are going to want to come and climb the fence and use it, and that's the reality.
Where's the basketball court in relation to your home right now? If you could show me on the map up there.
It's,
let me have Susan show me.
That's my home. The court was originally going to be right in front of the parsonage.
He's asking where it is now.
You can say, because.
Where it is now?
It was going to be moved right, literally, by my side, my yard. And in fact, when I bought this house.
It was going to be, wait a minute, it was going to be moved. Where
It was going to be moved in front of the parsonage house, which is over to the right.
It'll be right in there.
So it would have been literally right in our driveways. They did then say they would move it to the south.
And does that, as I mentioned to Jared, if you assume that and we're going to ask the applicant, if you assume that the applicant lives to the condition of moving it to the south, to the southern boundary line and no trees are removed, does that eliminate your concern with respect to the play yard? Because it seems to me, and maybe you help me out here, that by moving the play yard to the south, it's actually moving farther away from your home than it is right now.
Right, there will be a classroom in back of my backyard, but I bought it with the play yard there, but my backyard is closed off with windows.
But is it, is your concern, I get, your concern is the playground, not the building, not the actual construction of a classroom. And as I see it, maybe I'm wrong, is that by moving the play yard further south, they've actually moved the basketball court further away from your home than it is now. Am I missing that?
Oh, well, it's hard to describe, but the basketball court is deeper into the school grounds to the south. I never hear any sound from the basketball court. Now it will be moved where it will be literally right, even though it's to the south, it's the noise factor from that basketball court and the play yard will be actually more intense all the time than it was now, because I put in several $1,000s worth of trees, plus my backyard is closed, so I knew that was there when I bought the house, but now it's really going to be like a public park there with basketball, play equipment. It's visible, it's the noise, the sound is going to carry, and it's likely going to be used. The school does not enforce any of those rules, and I want to make sure that they do, and I think the type of fence will make a big difference. Landscaping will make a big difference, but I just feel like they want their agenda accepted without really concern for what the neighbors' changes, and it's a residentially zoned neighborhood. So, you know, it's like it changes everything for a lot of people and their circumstances. And, you know, there's going to be no way to prevent people from coming down Ivy and playing all weekend on the court, which is very visible, and unless the school agrees on any new plan to address the security issue, the fencing issue, the landscaping issue, and so on, which could make it much more palatable. And arbitrarily to say, well, we're not, I said, what about transplant? You know, maybe those trees could be moved to the north so that it could serve a purpose for sound and so on, and that they said, well, we're not going to move the trees. So, you know, it's kind of like we didn't get a chance to even express any of these concerns before they said, we're moving on.
Okay, I got you. All right. All right. You want to add anything? And then, because I'm going to take the applicant, I want to have the applicant come up and then I'll give you another shot. So you're welcome to stay there if you want to stay there. How many people, Mr. Coppola, you coming up on your own or you got somebody with you?
I'll bring the principal.
Okay. Okay. There's a question, hold on.
I do have one question for both of you. In our packet, in the notes and comments for the Planning Commission, it shows both of you making the comment that you would support moving the sports courts to the south. Did you both make those comments?
At the Planning Commission?
Yes.
At the Planning Commission meeting? Yes, but I did not realize that they were not going to move it as far south to the south boundary.
8 feet.
And when I saw, you know, it's like 12 additional feet closer. And so it isn't really to the south boundary. And what if, like Jared said, what if there's roots there and they say, well, now we can't upset the roots of the trees, so now we got to move it 12 more feet further north, and that will be even closer.
I believe I stated that I would be willing to see, I'd be open to seeing that. But to me, that I believe I meant I'd be open to seeing a plan for that. I don't, like I said, working, you know, in engineering, I'm visual with plans. I like to see them. I like to, you know, see exactly what's going on with them. So, I mean, that was, I believe, what my statement was. I would be open to seeing that proposal.
Okay. Thank you. Let them come on up and then you guys sit in the front there or wherever, and then we'll.
Mr. Mayor, Board of Supervisors, city staff. My name is John Kopelos. I'm the architect representing the Bethlehem Lutheran School. I have with me today the principal, Mr. Lonnie Kargas. We also have a couple Bethlehem Lutheran School Board members in the audience. For the record, I'd like to read our written response to the appeal, and then I'll make some additional comments and then be open for questions.
That's fine. I mean, I think, Mr. Coppola, you need to talk, you don't need to say anything, but I think what I'm hearing is, want to know if the fencing was in the original plan,
Yes, sir, it was.
and want to know if you're going all the way to the southern property line, subject to the setback that's required under our law?
For the record, during the Planning Commission meeting, I stood up and pointed to the map for the public,
And that pointing said what, to the,
where the fence was.
and so it goes all the way to the southern property line?
Correct.
There's not, and no trees are going to get pulled away?
Correct.
No roots are going to stop you, or are they?
I doubt it very much.
Okay.
The northern trees, 15 feet, 20 foot from the property line, maybe more.
Okay. How about the abandonment of the cul-de-sac? What Mr. Fazer said about if you abandon it the way it's scheduled, that you cut off access to his driveway.
That's probably a valid point. We just accepted his existing driveway as access to his property.
Okay. So you. So
That
you're okay-
certainly
you're
could
okay
be
with-
adjusted.
You're okay with moving that? You'd be okay with moving I think. Well, I better. Let's see.
Yeah, we wouldn't have a problem changing the property line to suit.
Okay.
That involves,
And then
to be honest with you, that's part of the abandonment process.
Right.
But, and that comes back to you, I understand.
Right, it does.
Yes.
How about the drainage issue?
Well, I find it kind of interesting, really, at this point in time, it's a city problem, unless
Well, you're all done.
if we get the abandonment, then I could see the school helping to solve that as a drainage problem.
Yeah, well, that's what, I want you to flesh that out a little bit. I'm just being facetious, I mean, because it is a problem right now with us.
Right.
So if this development goes forward, what is your estimate about what happens to the drainage? Worse, better, or same?
Well, it's got to be better.
Why?
Well, because as part of, once the street is abandoned, we will at least finish the improvements up to the pastor's driveway, which is past Mr. Fazer's property. So that part will be paved and guttered. And then depending on what the grades are, to determine what goes to the Lutheran property and what goes out to the Ivy Street. We would just have to see where that grade break is. Right now, we call it a detention basin, but basically it's a grass field that's depressed a foot. We could see that for detention purposes, maybe it's depressed another 6 inches at the most. But then that drainage basin further goes along Fritch's eastern property line as a ditch and eventually gets out to Bath Street, and that's what the drainage is for that area right now. If we get approval from the special use permit, we'll get our civil engineer to work with the city on what kind of drainage solutions are available there. We certainly don't want a pond there next to Mr. Fazer's either, so.
Okay. One other question. Karen has a question then. Landscaping? Tell us what you, okay. Well, you want to, no? Okay. What do you understand by the landscaping condition?
That we've got to take a study of what the city requirements are and see what our existing is and supplement it. And where we supplement it, I could see happening adjacent to the property owners. We did meet with the fire department. They do want access through the site. They want gates that they can access. At that particular point, we can't provide landscaping there, but we certainly could improve the north boundary. But there is existing trees on the north boundary right now. I could see us doing some infill there to help that. But my question to you, if Mr. Fazer already has his RV parked at that particular location and also has a 6-foot solid fence through a good portion of that location, I'm unsure what exactly the neighborhood wants, other than for us to go back to the planning department.
In security, Mr. Principal, maybe you could answer the security issue.
We're really waiting to see how this breaks out. We do have, in terms of security, one of the reasons why we wanted to move to begin with was to have all of our kids in one area. Right now, I've got kids in 3 areas: the parking lot, the side, and in the back. To put them all in one area, that's the security for the school in itself. We are planning to put security cameras on the back side. We do not have them there now. But to have the security camera, right now they face the parking lot and the playground area where the play equipment is. I need to, once this all happens, then I will work with our security company where we can place cameras at whatever spots it would happen. In terms of the gate being locked, I would want to sit down with the fire department and the sheriff's office to find out if I have to have that locked or if there has to be an opening in case of some kind of an emergency. That I just need to find out for certain. Right now we have an access gate that's unlocked. I was told when I took over 15 years ago that it had to be left unlocked for security purposes in case we had to abandon in a hurry out the side. Otherwise it would be a choke point with kids being stuck there. So that's why it's not locked at this point.
Is there a use of of your facilities by people other than your students?
We have sports activities some evenings, not every week. We do have the Boy Scouts that come in on Monday nights, and periodically there may be some type of a church function.
Okay, all right. Sorry. Now you want to read what you got there, John, Mr. Kopelos?
The Bethlehem Lutheran School project is John Kopelos for the record. The Bethlehem Lutheran School project is to build a classroom addition and relocate playground equipment and sports courts. All uses are existing. The classroom expansion will improve classroom size at the school. The students are already attending the school. The expansion allows for classroom size to reflect Lutheran school goals of reduced students per classroom. The playground and sports courts are existing and are to be relocated. The playground relocation will make room for the classroom expansion. The sports court relocation will improve the safety of the children who currently use sports courts in the parking lot. The school's construction timeline since inception is as follows. Phase 1 gym and classrooms, 1995. Phase 2 portable classrooms on East Pad, 1996. Phase 3 classroom wing build playground, 1997. Phase 4 kitchen, 1999. Phase 5 is proposed with a special use permit. During the Planning Commission meeting, we offered to relocate the playground equipment and sports courts plan adjacent to the Fritz School playground and away from the neighbors in attendance that had concerns about their location. We felt this was a reasonable suggestion during the public meeting and agreed to it. Various neighbors contacted the school directly to see the revised plan. Unfortunately, the revised plan was not completed until 8/27/15. Since that time, the neighborhood has been contacted to review the plan, and a copy was sent to Mr. Fazer, the neighborhood representative. Review of appeal talking points. Relocating playground equipment and sports court as per the revised plan moves these uses further away from the neighbors who have appealed the planning decision. We don't understand why the neighborhood would prefer the status quo over the approved plan. The revised plan removes no trees on site. The current cul-de-sac the Bethlehem Lutheran School proposes for abandonment is a gravel and dirt area that has never been paved or properly graded. The school proposes to improve this area for benefit of the neighborhood and its own site. The school will work with Carson City Public Works to improve drainage in this area per their requirements. We don't understand why the neighborhood would object to this. The new fence proposed by the school was shown and pointed to all attending the Planning Commission meeting on the site plan displayed on screen. Both neighbors who have written appeal letters have solid wood fences on their property along the school boundary line. All other items addressed in these appeal letters have been made a part of the conditions of approval of the special use permit. In summation, we feel all the pertinent planning questions have been answered within the special use permit process, and this project should be allowed to move forward.
Okay. Questions?
So, in general, and it may be a staff question so that I can understand how the project would move forward one way or the other, it appears that Mr. Fazer's issue on the abandonment, so if we could, does that happen before they get their building permits and it would come back here where we can address the issue before they started building the abandonment? Which order does that come?
Yes, they would have to apply for the abandonment and get it before they can move forward. And it would come to the Planning Commission and then to the board.
So Mr. Fazer would have an opportunity then in a public hearing to address the concerns that he felt he didn't get to address the first time with the abandonment. He'll actually get to do that before any of the other plans can carry forward.
As it relates specifically to the abandonment, yes, but not to the sports courts and
Right, but they
everything
can't-
related to the special use permit.
But they can't do the sports courts and other actions until the abandonment is completed.
Correct.
So he'll have the bite at the apple prior to work commencing anywhere else.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Continuing on with the abandonment, can you show me where the pavement ends? Is it right where the northern yellow line is now, or is it farther north?
So
there.
that yellow line on the east is actually, you can see there's a little bit of a jog compared to the west, and that was in Mr. Fazer's photo 3, that's the red little bit that was
That's
acquired.
the 10 feet.
The pavement actually ends on the west yellow line, so there was never actually any extensions made for the 5 or 6 feet that was extended. So the curb was never extended, the paving wasn't extended, it was just extended on his property for the RV.
And the proposed 6-foot fence would be on the southern boundary of the parsonage driveway.
That's correct.
And there's fencing also proposed for the east side of where the cul-de-sac is, connecting the northern property line to the fence that would then go east-west on the southern boundary of the driveway. So there'll be continuous fencing all through there.
Is that correct, John? That's how I understand it.
Yes, that fencing is existing in different locations, but right now, the school district, or the school, Lutheran school, has a 4-foot chain link fence that extends across where the dirt ends in exactly like Mr. Bunkowski described, going up east and going across the north.
Okay, so the proposed abandonment, where would the boundary line be between the city and the church? We have a jog there across Ivy Street. Where is the proposed abandonment property line going to be placed? Is it on the west, the north boundary line on the west, or the north boundary line on the east, or is it
Right
somewhere
now, we're
between?
showing it from the west, coming straight across. So that 10-foot section would be cut off.
So you could easily move it then to the northern boundary on
Correct.
the east side, or even a little farther south if need be, but you'll deal with that with staff on that.
Correct.
Okay, so I just wanted to be clear that all that can be cleared up. All right, thank you.
We really weren't aware that Mr. Fazer wanted additional driveway access. I mean, it was something he never expressed when I met him or at the Planning Commission meeting, but I'm sure that could be accommodated.
Can staff use the diagram up there and point the arrow where the fence, what everything was just described right here?
So the original proposal for the abandonment was at the north property line on the west side, which would go across and cut off the 10 feet that Mr. Fazer uses to access his side yard. The new proposed abandonment area, which quite frankly staff would have required as a part of the abandonment anyway, would be at the east property line across, so that Mr. Fazer's entire property would still be adjacent to public right-of-way.
Okay, I want to address Barbara's concern about security because part of that is valid. I would think that the church and the school would be concerned about liability after hours in terms of use. And I'm just familiar with other sites where the gates are locked after hours such that, it doesn't allow other people to, participate and utilize the facility. So if you could just address that.
That's part of the reason we wanted to move this back here, because we've talked about putting a gate on the facility where the staff parking is now on the south end of the building. We wanted to put a gated fence across there as well. Then we can lock things up. We talked to the fire department about a knock box so that they can access the gates coming from Ivy Street and through the staff parking area. That would alleviate our concern. Right now, we can't lock anything up. So that's part of our goal to keep everything safer in the future. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Jared or Barbara, you want to come on back up? If you want, you don't have to.
Jared Fazer for the record. Just a few things I wanted to clear up there. Mr. Coppola stated that they would pave the abandonment area based upon grade breaks, which means that it could possibly, potentially slope back towards my property, creating a worse drainage situation. It doesn't necessarily mean this is going to get better. He made it sound like it could go either way. So, that's still one large issue that I have there.
Let me address that issue. I can't believe that the staff would allow a drainage plan to get worse, to back up more on your property. I don't think they would do that from an engineering standpoint. You guys can answer that, but
I think with item 20, increased drainage and detention must be addressed as part of the construction permit. We were implying that all the development standards would be followed, which includes not ponding in a low spot without rectifying it. I think what Mr. Kopelos mentioned is continuing that curb line to the south is one option to bring that further and pond it actually on site in the detention basin.
does that make sense?
Well, yeah, that makes sense, but then it's also when he states that it could, based upon the grade breaks, I'm just trying to get the information of.
Okay, well, here, I think, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but as I understand it, the development standards will not permit them to exacerbate the drainage on your property. Is that right or wrong? If they build this?
That's correct.
Will not.
Okay.
Okay.
The next issue, he stated again in his letter, and I still don't feel like I'm quite clear on this part of the plan. When you look at photo 2, we're talking about still no trees being disturbed and the project being on the southern property line, and those two just cannot happen. They can't happen together because there's no way you're putting in a basketball court in 12 feet between the fence and the tree line. I'm still confused on where we are in that.
Okay, well, here's where I think we are on that issue, at least where I am on that issue. I've got the applicant's stating categorically that it's going to the south side. They agreed to that condition, going categorically to the south property line for the property line. There's also said no trees are going to be removed. I have to assume that they're lying to me in order to agree with what you're saying. I don't know how I get there, because I don't have any basis to say that. Lying is a strong word. I mean, they're just pulling the wool over our eyes, or my eyes.
Well, and I'm not trying to state that. I'm just stating, based upon photo 1 and then the plan on photo 2. Photo 2 shows the court north of the property, north of the trees, which means it's not on the property line. Photo 1 here, I show the property line, show the existing trees, so I don't know how that's going to happen. I guess that's just something I wanted clarified.
Okay, well, help me there's a fundamental question, I think, Jared, and I want your answer if you could provide it to me. What we're dealing with here are existing uses on an existing piece of property. They're moving them around, but they're existing uses. And for one better or for worse, when you bought your property there, these were uses on that piece of property. And now, what I see happening is, at least from what happened to the Planning Commission, is that the uses are becoming less intrusive to your property than they are now. Am I missing something there?
To me, it's becoming more intrusive. Currently, all of their playground and their basketball court is surrounded by buildings, so it blocks the noise fairly well for me. But now you're moving it next to my house into an open field, which then sound will carry further. I was just this last week was in my bedroom, which is on the north end of my house, and then they're using megaphones out there now, to yell over the children. It's making it louder and louder, for the residents here, because currently they're in their own complex, mostly. And the existing buildings are blocking that sound.
Okay. So you would say, I think what you're really saying then is you'd prefer to have the property stay open.
I would prefer to have the property stay open. I was a little confused when I came to this appeal. I wasn't sure am I fighting that I don't want this, or am I fighting how the Planning Commission failed? So I chose failed is probably the wrong word, erred. I chose that one because that's how I felt it was supposed to be. When it comes down to it, I don't like this plan. I bought this home with an open field next to it, and that's, of course, the way I would like it to stay. City, or not city, the church and school staff and the school kids, they're there, school days during school hours. I'm there all the time. I live there. I have to look at this all the time. This is a constant thing for me. This isn't, it's only there, I'm only there every once in a while. We're the residents, we have retired residents. They're always there, always. They're home a lot. I'm off on Fridays. I go home for lunch during the week, and that's going to significantly up the noise in that area. Currently, they play during my lunchtime, over being blocked by buildings. Now you're going to be putting them right next to my house, right next to my living room. Currently they don't use that field during lunchtime. They use it for PE, but now they're going to be using that field all the time. And that's going to put them right on top of my house, I feel.
Okay. All right. What else you got?
I just wanted to reiterate, the 10-foot property is not additional driveway access. It's a paved driveway. It's been paved for as long as I've been there. So, I just wanted to state that it is paved, and it's been paved for quite a while.
And you were listening to the discussion on the fact that the abandonment, that Supervisor Bagwell brought up, that the abandonment process is going to be a separate process that will, and the applicant said they would accommodate your request there?
Okay.
That's what I heard.
Okay. Well, I will be attending that meeting as well.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Anything else? Jared? Barbara? Anything?
I'm good. Thank you.
Okay.
I have one main issue. I just want to agree that it really doesn't, that's why I asked if you could see, the noise now is minimal. The basketball court noise, I've never heard a ball bounce because it's all encased within the school property. It will definitely impinge upon the neighborhood and the noise with even to the south. Originally, and this is my big question is, I don't know if I could reach it, but on the yellow line where it's darker, and then you see that it goes, see the parsonage house. Could somebody with an arrow point to that? To the right, where the darker area is, yeah, in the middle of the other way, right by that line where it's darker and lighter.
On the bottom.
On the bottom.
Down a little bit.
Yeah, that's just.
The existing grass area.
Yeah, a little further up, right there. Okay, when the land was given from the city to the church, now on their fence is now going to move 35 feet further up than it is now, which brings it literally to the north boundary of the parsonage house, which is literally 35 feet further now to where kids are, they're going to add, I don't know what the purpose of abandoning that is now. Originally, the court was going to be there. Had that been approved, it would have been a purpose for that to be given. But at this point now, the fence will move 35 feet further toward the homes, and my home and Jared's home specifically, the closest, and they're going to probably put grass in, which would make sense if it's their property now, but that means the kids are now 35 to 40 feet closer, and meeting with the architect, we still can't even I went out there and measured myself, but there's no purpose that I can see to then give them that piece of property to move their land and impinge it further into the neighborhood, including the noise of the court and the use at night and so on. So that was my main point. It just doesn't make any sense anymore. If the planning commission had approved the court to be right there, then you say, well, we have no choice. The court's going to be there. They have to have that land. But now they don't need it at all because the court's on the south side, and yet they're still going to utilize it to move their kids and property further to me and Jared and the whole area. And it'll be even more noisy. So that's my point.
Okay. All right.
So I think to be clear for the process here today is that you recognize this board nor the Planning Commission has approved the abandonment. I do believe the issues that you are raising here should be discussed at the planning, and it will be, because I think you bring up some very valid points of moving the noise 35 feet closer to you and cutting off driveways. And I think all of those issues will be addressed, and you'll have that opportunity for discussion to talk about the fencing and abandonment. So I think you brought up some very good points, but I don't think they fit this piece of your appeal. So just to let you feel good, though, you've brought up excellent points for the Planning Commission on the abandonment issue. And you may have some good things that they can consider during the Planning Commission, and then that will have to come back here for the abandonment. So just want to reiterate that.
Do we then go back to the Planning Commission?
You will. For the abandonment, all of these issues you can address at the Planning Commission.
So the fencing, the 40% landscaping they
No,
refer to?
just the abandonment issues that you're talking about, on whether they should be abandoned at all. Like you said, maybe it's not needed anymore because of this change may negate part of the abandonment need.
So how do we address, or do we ever get to address the type of fencing, the security, all of that is?
That part's over.
Over.
Just the abandonment.
Although, Barbara, I think they are addressing the security issue. So I think that will be something that you can rest assured is being handled. But I concur with Lori, the abandonment process will give you a chance, you and Jared both a chance, to address some of the other issues, which are very valid points. And so that's not done, but a certain portion, what we have to address today has to be addressed, so.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Okay, we're going to bring this back to the board here then. Under the ordinance, this board can reverse, modify, or affirm the decision of the Planning Commission. So we're now on making the time when these come to tough decisions. But anybody want to discuss it?
I do.
Go.
I look at the aerial here, and these are existing uses that have been in place since 1995 through 97. So the objection that I'm hearing is moving those uses from the central portion of the property to the east part of the property, but they're existing there and they impact the residents now. If they were not relocated, but the school chose to expand, they would still have the right to add activities that would impact the homeowners on the east with some other activity. So I just don't understand how this is how we can address the issues that were brought up here today. The uses are existing. It doesn't matter if we move the playground and the courts or not. If the school wanted to run all their children out onto the east side of the property and let them play, they have the right to do that now, and they'll have the right to do that in the future. And then I look, which is our real mission here today, is to see technically if the Planning Commission did anything incorrectly, and I don't see that they did. So based on all of that information, I don't see how I could move forward and deny or approve the appeal.
I concur with Brad. I think the property owner has the right to utilize their property as long as it's up to their property line. Whether it infringes upon the noise level, well, that could be an issue with the noise ordinance down the line. But they have a right to use the property in any fashion, as long as it's legal, as I do, or any property owner. So I concur with Brad on this as well.
Let me just say one other thing is during the abandonment process, the drainage issue is going to get solved better than what it is now. I mean, and that's a big issue. I mean, the drainage is an existing problem, but that's going to get resolved. So we'll see where that goes during the abandonment process. But all right, let's take a motion, then we'll see where it goes.
I move to deny the appeal and uphold the Planning Commission's approval of special use permit, SUP 15-065, to allow the addition of classrooms to an existing school and modification of the school site playground and outside sports areas on property zone single-family 6,000 located at 1845 Mountain Street, APN 001-111-33, based on the findings and with the conditions of approval outlined in the staff report, as well as the 3 additional conditions of approval added by the Planning Commission outlined in the notice of decision, and incorporating the discussion that we had today regarding the abandonment placement.
Motion in a couple seconds. On the motion, discussion.
Just want to comment that the reason I'm going to vote for this is because the abandonment process happens first. So that you can rest assured before anything happens, the abandonment issues will be addressed.
On the motion, further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carried. Okay. Get ready for the next Planning Commission meeting on abandonment. All right. Thanks to everybody for your professional way you handled this matter, and these are tough decisions, but everyone did a nice job. It's how democracy is supposed to work. Okay. All right. Let's go to number 22. This is the ending, non-action items, all these things at the end. Board members, you got anything you want to raise up on any of these?
Couple of quick things. Just wanted to check and see if we're any further along. We had a citizen come forward about RV and trailers parking on the city streets. If anything will be coming from city staff on that, if it's generating any conversation or committees.
Yeah, to answer your question, we've actually had a number, I mean, it's actually a common complaint. I know Supervisor Bagwell has also been working the issue, and staff is looking to tighten up the language in our ordinance. It would be a change to the existing language, but yes, we are working that.
Is there any way any other board member can become part of the process? We have to form our own committee.
No, I mean, there's no committee, it's just internal staff work at this point, but I'll be happy to sit down with you and bring you in the loop on where we are with it. Okay. But, yeah, I mean, it's a common, RV parking on the street is probably one of the top 5 complaints that at least I get in my office.
Could the board members get the ordinance or the, whatever is pertaining to it so we can look at it? Or do we have to look that up ourselves? Could you forward that to us?
I'll be happy to.
Also, I do want to compliment city staff for arranging to have board members access to the Carson City Connect so we can see what's coming in from citizens and how staff is responding to those, I don't want to say complaints, but inquiries. So I do want to say thank you for setting that up. That's very nice. I do appreciate it. I was contacted by Denise Stevens of the Nevada Humane Society over concerns I had over the departure of their, management overseer. And she's going to address the board at the next board meeting. She could not make this one, but our conversation was that she will be here for the next board meeting in October and just touch base on where the Nevada Humane Society is at with Carson City with the departure of the CEO. Also, going back to August 4th, 2013, I made a request, and maybe with the new direction the IT department has taken, they could maybe possibly accommodate this. But I asked when board members vote on agenda items that the results of those agenda items should be posted within the website within 24 hours if possible, just as a formal vote of anything. So maybe the IT department could just post the agenda and how the board voted on those agenda items with this new direction the IT department has taken, if that's possible.
I think you're going to, when you go to Granicus, it's going to be electronically recorded votes. It'll be immediately there.
Well, when we go to Granicus, the video is going to be immediately available. I mean,
and the vote.
This goes more to like a minutes question. This isn't really an IT issue.
Okay, so with the new system, IT, we can access that, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's all I wanted to verify.
On video.
On video, correct.
Yeah, real time. As soon as the mayor gavels the meeting over, that's going to be archived instantly.
Right, so you can go there, get the results of how the board voted on any agenda item when it all goes into.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
Anybody else? Anybody? Okay, concluding public comment, anybody? I don't see any. Are we ready to adjourn? You ready? Unless there's an objection, we're adjourned.